That's on.
I'm good most of the time.
Okay, we gotta keep moving. Sorry. Come down here.
This is your tough mic.
So important. Hey, you guys who are going to be doing the talking about the different areas you're responsible, sit in this area right here. I'm sorry to change it. That's just the side. No, you're mad.
I'm not mad. I swear to God, I'm not. First of all,
But we also are going to be efficient with our time, and everyone will have a voice.
yeah, I'm actually Jerry loves it. Could I actually get the task force members to come down as well, please?
Uh-oh, refusal already. Security. Hey, the cookies as well. Bring the cookies down as well.
Say my camera for two.
So what's the format going to be? So we're going to. Nope. Okay.
So we'll start off with the same background as and then get into
So the important overarching.
and this is the 10th, right?
Yes. And final.
That's mine.
I know. I don't.
This is what I believe Rob wants us to. You know I'll have trouble with that. I want to. Probably here, in this area. Where's,
Wireless. Yeah.
which mic are you?
Cheryl. My name's Cheryl.
Cheryl?
Seems to be his favorite seat.
You right? Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to City Hall and welcome to the council chambers. We were originally going to start at 1, so we waited a little bit to allow some more people to slide in, but we'll get started. So again, I want to welcome everyone. My name is Greg Watts. I'm a member of the Toronto Police Service and also a member of the task force. And we've all the task force members are up front here, as well as David Signacki, who is up there. So this is our 10th and final consultation session. We've traveled the entire city getting input from the different residents of Toronto, and we've got a whole bunch of feedback already. So what we wanted to do here, being it being our last session, is to show kind of a showcase of all the different things we've heard, which is behind you on the slide deck. And there's also a wrap-up on the different stations at the back on the second level that you can actually take with you if you choose to do so. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce these two gentlemen beside me, and then we'll get rocking. So this is Andy Pringle. He is the chair of the Police Services Board, aka the Big Boss. And this is Frank Bergen. He's a superintendent with Toronto Police. He's a superintendent of strategy management that's going to be taking over all of the recommendations and looking at how to implement all the things that we're talking about. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chair Pringle.
Thanks, Greg. And thank you all very much for coming. I recognize a lot of familiar faces, so I'm not going to go through, oh, Miguel, great. But again, thank you for coming out on a Saturday. And as Greg said, that we've had extensive consultations across the city. This is the final. You'll notice on the screen behind me, you know, those of you who were at the consultations filled in yellow stickies about ideas, and we said we'd keep and collate them all, which we've done, and a number of them are coming up on the board. As you know, I think everybody knows, the background to this whole process started with the board meeting in December of last year, where we considered a most recent report about modernization suggestions done by a consultant firm, KPMG. And the board decided at that meeting in December that we'd had more than 7 or 8 studies over the last half decade, that it was time to bring all of those together and put together an action plan. That was the formation of the Transformational Task Force. The work really started in February. The task force is composed of 7 members from the service, including Mark Saunders, the chief, and 7 members from the community, including myself as chair. David Sugnacki is one. I would let you know, for those who have seen the report, it is on our website. The interesting thing in the background is the appendices list all of the reports that have been done previously, and there's quite a few of them. And it's from there that we started with looking at those suggestions. It also lists the members of the task force and the members of from the community and their responsibilities, so that you get a full understanding of that. And the intention was always that we would spend the first period of time putting together a vision and coming forward with an interim report, which is this report that came forward to the board in June, and that we would then work towards the final report to be finished at the end of December and presented to the board meeting next January. And an integral part of the whole process was the community consultations, coming across the city and getting input from all of you. So that's very much the process that's gone on. This is the final iteration of that. And again, thank you for coming, but I want to thank all of the people that have come to the various meetings for their input. It's been extensive. It's been valuable. I think particularly a number of things that were added were at the third meeting, a focus on greater accountability in the report, and so we've taken account of all of those. As you know from previous meetings, and if you've looked at the report, the roadmap in the center of the report really talks about what we're doing and where we're going. You'll see it everywhere in these meetings and on the website, and it really talks about our mission is community safety, and our principles are to be active and accountable and trusted, be transparent and engaged, to be inclusive and collaborative, and to be affordable and sustainable. And the 3 goals that we've talked about are to be where the public needs us the most, to ensure that we partner with the communities to provide better policing. And that's really the centerpiece of what we're talking about is greater engagement with the communities as part of the solution. And then the final is making sure that we have the solutions for the complex city and multinational city that we live in. And you've seen before how we get there, and the stickies come out of that. So again, this is really kind of a wrap-up session. We thought rather than go around and, as we've done at other sessions, and have people go to the various the 5 areas, action areas, we would just have a greater conversation here. So again, before I pass it over to Frank, and let me say that Frank is going to be the person in charge of the implementation of this, so that when this report comes in its final version in January and gets approved, as I'm sure it will be by the Services Board, it will then have an implementation plan to it, and it's Frank and his team that will be responsible under the direction of the chief to make that happen, and coming back to the board on a regular basis, I think quarterly, to report on the progress of how they're doing. So with that, Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of things I want to say. First of all is bring on regards from the chief. He's not able to be here today, so unfortunately you end up with me. And command also passes on their best wishes. The best thing of this today was structured to be in the 5 key areas that we're going to. But we had a last-minute decision based on the fact that as I went around the room, I recognized that a lot of you have been very helpful because you've already been attending our actual public consultations, this being our 10th. Just by way of hands, a show of hands, who has already attended one of the public consultations? And keep your hands up as well, and put them down only if you didn't put a sticky. Did you also put a sticky on a board? So hopefully, thank you, hopefully you'll have an opportunity now to see whether or not your language is showing up on our screen. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually hopefully create more of an intimate environment. I do know that, if I'm not mistaken, by show of hands, who's from St. Stephen's or who is from the 14th Division area? Outstanding. Certainly we read with great interest what you had published in the Toronto Star. I also have worked with the CPLC and many of you. Peter and I have worked in the past on some of the work at the works at Queen West, at Parkdale Community Center, and we certainly took great interest at 14 Division to be part of the collaboration with safer injection sites at 168 Bathurst Street. I see as well that we're fairly fortunate that 2 people here represent Toronto Community Housing, that they in fact are here for a 3-day conference, and they decided that outside of the workshops that were offered in there, they came over from the Sheridan, so welcome. Marcy, are you someone who lives in Don Mills 33 Division area? And correct, and you also are here because you're looking at future amalgamations and what does that mean to a community, to a resident population. I've also been able to speak to a young lady from Driftwood and to say hello, so that actually prompts me to say that we absolutely acknowledge that the original notice had said 9 o'clock. We absolutely apologize because we actually have heard that we have missed the opportunity to meet some amazing people who did show up at 9 o'clock. I will let you know that after that was posted, Megan Gray and CorpCom and a lot of the people that work very hard on this implementation in the task force were told loud and clear, 9 o'clock on a Saturday is not a good time. So they were asked if we could change that, so it was changed to 1. It appears then that we didn't properly communicate that, for which I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that you attended for that. I also met a young lady here who's from 13 Division, who's had some long-standing issues with her community and been working with 13 Division. And I also have been someone who is a conduit to further correspondence to the chief. So what I'm trying to say is, it's great to see familiar faces. The familiar faces are important to us, not only at a Police Services Board level where we hear monthly, many of you here, Miguel, thank you, and we'll make sure to buy his t-shirts. They'll be at a kiosk near you soon. But with that, if we do not take the time to listen, we're not going to get this correct. We're going to make some mistakes. Right now, as you probably are aware, we are a budget that's bloated over $1 billion. I use the word bloated because that's what we've heard. We've heard that when there's public consultations that it's such a large budget item. So this hasn't been a budget discussion, but it has been a discussion of how do we transform? How do we actually meet the needs of a growing, rapid, and very complex community by making sure that in the future, in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we are still going to be relevant and we're still going to meet the needs of the community. So what we've had to do is we've actually had to almost clear the whiteboard and start designing what does that look like? What does the future look like? I think it would be fairly foolish if we did that in the absence of public consultation. So for that, we're very grateful. We're very grateful. Marcy, you reminded me that after this report in December to January is released, does that mean consultation stops? Absolutely not. Just by fundamental principles, every quarter we will be reporting to the Police Services Board public reports about the progress of the implementation. But the reality is, if we are looking in the future and amalgamating services, looking at different partnerships and growing and shrinking in some respects, we're going to be, again, doing that in many, many consultative committees and many opportunities. As well as we would be very short-sighted if we didn't look at implementation and actually cut off the externals, the David Soknickis, the other people who have contributed so much to this process. So today, what we are going to talk about is how do we transform? How do we take 17 divisions, the bricks and mortar that right now are serviced by 5,200 police officers in total, just shy of 8,000, and how do we get a system that actually puts our police officers out into the community? What you will see in the final report is you're going to look at some actual data, some studies, some demand models, some target optimization, language that has come from Environics. And it's exciting because it actually takes variables and it takes what our math is today for our radio calls priorities 1 to 6 and starts looking at how do we transform. One of the ways we are looking at transforming is making a decision of how do we move from a primary police service to a priority police service. Let's just do some 101, Police Service Act 101. The basic tenets of a Police Services Act which tell us what our duties are, they're very simple. There's 5. Crime prevention, law enforcement, assisting victims, public order, and emergent response. Some of you are going to be here today because you're concerned about our emergent response. Some of you had told us loud and clear that you'd rather have a police officer who is a partner and not an enforcer. Some of you also say that we might have a skewed approach to law enforcement. So we hear that as well. But the two that I would think that we really need to concentrate on is crime prevention and assisting victims of crime. And in order to do that in a more robust and a more proper fashion, what we truly have to be able to identify is that we cannot do that alone. Some interesting reports that you should be familiar with. Strategy for a Safer Ontario. Strategy for a Safer Ontario talks about amalgamating the spirit of prevention. If you're with the Ministry of Health, prevention means this. If you're the Ministry of Education, prevention means this. If you're with our ministry, Community Safety and Corrections, we know what prevention means, that's crime prevention. So if we are building a model that's only predicated on response, but not supporting and not giving the tools and not having the partnerships, in fact, to repair the damage of a break and enter, to repair the damage of a robbery, to repair the damage of a mugging or whatever, then we're not doing our job because all we're doing is putting Band-Aids on the problem. What we have already discovered is an incredible partnership of opportunity here in the City of Toronto, all the areas within the City of Toronto. If we start looking at simple things such as a 911 response, we can't look at that without looking at 311. We can't look at 911 without looking at how do we share these responsibilities in a triage response with Toronto paramedics, with Toronto Fire, with Animal Service, municipal licensing, bylaw, how we can do a better job at doing this. Right now, I can tell you with reading with St. Stephen's, one of the things, and it's certainly come up in the stickies, is how we are dealing with the challenge of mental illness and how we are properly meeting the needs of a community that is, in some cases, very much in need of assistance. We can't do it alone, because what we walk around in our utility belt is not always accepted for that particular resolution. So we have to make sure that we can expand mobile crisis intervention, that we can work with the province and the LHINs, and we can have a very robust opportunity, again, to collaborate and to look at different ways of doing it. So bear with us as we now go through a couple things. When we talk about this transition, we had the 5 key areas, and those 5 key areas have been reminded of them a great deal, and they're within our strategy map. Greg, can you help me? What we're going to do is we're going to start talking about who is the representative from our service here right now that has done most of the conversations about how we relate to our communities. Which one? Suzanne, could you come up, please? So Suzanne and all the members of our internal team are now going to take the opportunity to walk you through some of the questions, some of the stickies, some of the concerns that will be on this deck that's behind me. But hopefully what you have the opportunity to do is to hear your voice, to be part of this process that's going to be documented that, in fact, during these consultations, your your information, your position meant something to us, and it's something that we gave some weight to. Suzanne?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suzanne Walsh, and I'm an inspector with the Toronto Police Service, obviously. And for the past year, I've been part of the Transformational Task Force. The majority of my career, 30-plus years, has been in operational policing. So I've been in frontline policing duties for most of my career. In addition to that, I've been in training for a number of years. And I've worked in some of our most challenging communities across Toronto. I've also had an opportunity to be a manager of the Community Response Unit in 31 Division, if someone's here from Driftwood, for a number of years. So I've kind of taken upon myself to focus on our safe communities through our enhanced partnerships with our neighborhoods. And I can elaborate on that if we have an opportunity to go upstairs to look at the boards there. But essentially what we've been hearing from all these consultative sessions, and we've heard very loud throughout the past 10 sessions that we've been involved in, is that we want an enhanced relationship with the neighborhood officer. And what we envision as we move forward with the new policing model is an enhanced focus on the neighborhood model. So we hope to incorporate neighborhood officers in each of the 140 identified neighborhoods. Those 140 neighborhoods are identified by the City of Toronto, and we hope to have one and more officers assigned to each of those neighborhoods, with essentially a team of officers in some of our priority neighborhoods. And the feedback that we've been receiving from some of our challenged neighborhoods is that they like to put a face to the name that's been assigned to the neighborhood so that they have a person of reference that they can call for any particular issue that they've been experiencing in their neighborhood. It's been working in many of the challenging neighborhoods across Toronto, and we hope to expand on that program as we move forward with the new policing model. We hope that neighborhood policing will become the core policing function and the face of frontline policing, with all of our support units focusing and supporting the neighborhood officer program. So it's essentially what we have now considered the Community Response Unit. It's going to be an evolution of community response into a larger picture of neighborhood safety, with more dedicated resources of neighborhood officers within our neighborhoods, walking, talking, on bicycles throughout these neighborhoods, and dedicated solely to that neighborhood for a tenure which is yet to be determined, but that'll be a number of years, so that the community actually has an opportunity to meet with on a regular basis their neighborhood officer and call that neighborhood officer or a team of officers that they're familiar with if they're experiencing crime and disorder issues, quality of life issues, or issues that keep reoccurring in that neighborhood. So there's also going to be some support teams of uniform officers that are going to be supporting the neighborhood officers that are going to be functioning in a surge capacity role. That means when a particular neighborhood experiences an incident of violent crime or otherwise, we'll have additional resources that we can draw upon that work in uniform that can back up the uniform officers, the neighborhood officers in that particular neighborhood. So this is something that we've received throughout our consultative sessions, the need to put a face to the name that's been assigned to the neighborhood. We often hear that police officers are in and out of a neighborhood when there's been a particular problem associated, a 911 call, for example. There'll be a rush of officers into a neighborhood, but just as quickly they're gone again. We hope to dedicate these resources, frontline resources, to our neighborhoods for a sustained period of time to establish and grow those relationships that are so important in our neighborhoods, and to also have our officers, our neighborhood officers, working with not only our residents, but our community agencies that are key in enhancing community safety. Alone, we cannot solve every problem, but we're hopeful that if we work with our community agencies within each of the neighborhoods, we can work towards long-term problem solving and sustainability of some of the issues that are facing us in our neighborhoods. Sir?
Thank you. So bear with us for just a moment, because we're going to go through the 5 areas of transformation. Then we're going to open mic, and then I'll give you an opportunity to have a voice. Greg, do you want to do a follow-up now?
Thank you. So my name is Greg Watts again. And so if you look at our second section of transformation, it says how we deliver our services from primary to priority response. And really what that means is it's flipping the switch on reaction versus prevention. So if you look at today, the way that we're currently structured in the current model of policing, something happens, we go. Something happens, we go, and we get dispatched. And the way we get dispatched is based on our 17 divisions throughout the City of Toronto. There's emerging technologies that can allow us to respond a lot better and a lot more efficient in terms of how we get there, using GPS technology and all that other stuff. But today, the majority of our resources is spent doing that. The majority of our resources is spent in police cars, answering radio calls. And those radio calls vary from priority 1, meaning there's a crime in progress, someone is in danger, right to very kind of low police priority, there's a chicken in a tree. True story. And this is what our officers are doing. So going from primary to priority means really looking at what the demand for service is, and by looking at our goals in terms of the partnerships, identifying what are those calls that we're sending police officers to that really aren't a police matter. That's not a police issue. So the partnership means working with the City of Toronto to identify who the best person is to get to that call. And Superintendent Bergen talked earlier about the MLS, municipal licensing and standards, all these animal services, all these other different agencies that are out there that can provide, in a lot of cases, a more of a sustainable solution to these issues. So in priority response, going right back to those priority 1 calls. So someone is in danger, there's immediate threat to life or property. We're going to make sure that using those GPS type technologies, using a lot of the stuff that we already do today, that we're going to get better at that. We're going to be a lot more nimble, we're going to be a lot faster, and we're going to be able to complement that response with what Suzanne Walsh talked about within the neighborhoods. Because again, the Band-Aid approach just doesn't work. Running from a call to call to call, putting a Band-Aid on a situation, it doesn't work, because what ends up happening is the next day it happens again, and we go back again and again and again. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just the police that are going to these calls, but a lot of times these individuals and our communities are already dealing with social service agencies that are out there. And we're all doing things independently of each other. We're all doing things in a siloed effect. So when we talk about be where the public needs us the most, enhancing partnerships and the complex needs of a large city, everything kind of ties in together. So we need to figure out how to answer those highest priority calls for service, tie in the partnership, the social service agencies that can help a more sustainable solution, and then really figure out what those complex needs are. The superintendent talked about mental health already. That's a complex need in our city. And it's not a police response. We have a part to play, but if we do partnerships, if we get those partnerships right, we can actually provide a lot better service to the community. So in essence, that's what moving from primary to priority response is to be able to answer the calls for service by reducing the demand, allowing our officers a lot more flexibility in terms of what we can go to, and then sustaining it with partnerships and through the neighborhood officer program that Suzanne Walsh talked about. Thank you.
I will share with you that I was assigned this role in May of this year, and I am in my 35th year of policing, so I don't know if that gives you any confidence, because I will let you know that I'm an operations guy. I have someone who has a good sense of what's going on. I've been very fortunate having worked in the Corps. I've started in 52 Division, I've worked in 51 Division, 55 Division, 22 Division, and 14 Division. So I'll be honest with you, the nicest part of that is I've got some great familiar friends in this room that I've noticed on both ends of the spectrum of how we've met or how we've worked together. I think what Greg said is really key, and I want to let you know one thing that you can have some confidence when we are looking at implementation, that when I did arrive in May, Greg Watts was the first person that I stole from the task force in order to work with our project management. He's outstanding. He gets it. Scott McKean, certainly with crisis response in the City of Toronto, I think you concur. This is a person who truly understands the importance of partnerships and working in a collaborative city in order to make sure that we can meet the needs of the 141 neighborhoods. Now, what Greg said is also built on what Suzanne said, and now into segue, we can hear from Mark Barkley, and Mark can certainly talk about access to service, and he can talk about some incredible things that we are looking to do in the next few years.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Barkley. I'm currently the unit commander of 54 Division, which, if you've read the report, how many people here have actually read the report? Excellent. That's excellent. Thank you so much, because that's the first step to being an informed and engaged community, is reading the report, understanding the documents, and I hope you'll take that same diligence and read the final report. It helps us so we can properly engage with you and have a really good conversation. We're talking about access to services. What does that mean? If I look around the room, as a number of people are walking, I see we're all got cell phones, tablets, whatnot. The world is changing. There was a National Phone Board video in 1957. It talked about a day in the life of the Toronto Police. And it's funny to watch it, and you see the police officer, and an incident occurs. They take their notes in their paper notebook, and then they scurry back to the police station. And we had to have police stations with all sorts of desks. And there was the old police officers and detectives with the cigarettes hanging out of their mouths and typing away, manual typewriters, or the one-finger special. Because that's the way we did business from 1957 right through to when I joined in 1985. We were still doing business the same way. Then we slowly began to evolve. Out came the computers in the cars. They gave us a little bit more accessibility in the cars. Things started to change, but we're still very much rooted to old processes, and one of those old processes is how we deploy our people in the facilities that we use to house them in. Policing has changed. All that you've heard so far is about partnerships, relationships, access, building partnerships and strong relationships with your officers, officers in the community, officers embedded in neighborhoods, officers being there for a longer time in those neighborhoods, getting to know your officers, having them work with programs, partnering with all of the other city ABCs and Ds to provide services to you. That doesn't happen inside a police station. It doesn't happen when police officers are stuck at a desk. That's not where they need to be. Where they need to be is in your neighborhoods, in your communities, working with you in the rec centers, partnering with all the different entities, the local groups, faith leaders, everybody. They should be accessible to you. You should be able to see them walking down the street, bike riding, getting out, walking the malls, dropping into the libraries. Wherever it is that we need to be, it is not seated in a station. So we had something called the Model Division Study back in the 1980s, and it said, you know, if you're going to build a facility, every police officer that works there requires 160 square feet of space. But it was built on the mindset that we're still 1957. We're still going to come back and sit there at a desk and take a report. That's not the way we police. I hear on all these consultations, I hear stuff about the police in the neighborhood and some of the great programs that are being run. We've had emails from various CPLC members saying, you know, the programs are amazing. It's unbelievable what's going on in the community. And we hear from the community members saying, we want more. We want more relationship with the officers. We want to engage in professional relationships with our officers. That's excellent. That doesn't occur inside a facility. It occurs out in the neighborhoods. So that's why we're taking a look at what we do with our facilities. How many do we need? Where should they be? And we've engaged the Environics Corporation to come and work with us to use the most comprehensive data modeling tools available, all sorts of information to show us what it would look like if we had different numbers of police facilities, and if our police facilities were different sizes, and going forward, if we can look to co-locate or provide joint services in those facilities. So we're exploring all of these things to be better situated where we need to be. It doesn't matter where a police officer parks his or her car, where they change into their uniform, where their locker is at the end of the day. It matters where they provide you the services you're requesting of them. That's in your neighborhoods, not seated in a station. That's why we talk about the connected officer, empowering police officers with smart devices so that anything and everything they need to do is on their belt, on that device. They don't need to go back to the station. Their memo books are electronic. There will be no longer a need for them to be seated at that desk as they were in the 1980s, as they were in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s. It's all about being in the neighborhoods and being engaged with you in your communities, your officers. You'll be able to go online and see who, if you click your street, who are my officers? What are their cell phone numbers? What are their email addresses? Here's their photos. We want you to have that relationship. And it doesn't occur by them being there only for a year. We've heard that loud and clear. They have to be there and embed it for a couple of years. We've heard that, and that's when you read the report in its totality, these themes keep coming up over and over again. It's about having that relationship and having that officer there providing professional, high-quality services to you. We're talking about the access for each of you in terms of how you can report an incident. How many people have ever used online reporting? 1, 2, okay? So we've got a lot of work to do there because there's a lot of things occur that really don't need a police officer to attend. If you know, a small incident occurs, maybe a piece of concrete should fall off the underground parking and dent your hood of your car. You just want to make a report about that. And if you call and you realize, oh my goodness, you know, it's a busy day, there's lots going on, it's a rainy day, there's accidents, the police are out there trying to deal with those things, you could wait several hours. We want to give you better tools. We want to give you better access to the services you need at a time and a place that's convenient for you. You shouldn't have to sit there waiting for a couple of hours. You should simply be able to take a couple of photos of it, you know, go online, go through the app. Maybe if you're too busy, maybe you've got things to do, you're heading off to work, you do it later in the day. But it's at a time and a place that's convenient for you. Similarly, we want to deploy some of our civilian members to take some reports at the front desk. So if you don't have the opportunity, perhaps you don't have online access, you can still book an appointment, or you can do it over the telephone. But it's about giving you the access you need when and where you need it, rather than having it singularly rooted in the response of police officers who have to go there and take that report, and meanwhile you're waiting. Not every single report would require that level of response. There are alternative ways of providing you this access to services. So it's working in mindset of that, and we're learning from what we're seeing around the world, including all through Europe, about this is a shift about providing you the services you need at a time and a place that is convenient, online, and then focusing our police officers, as you've heard, on those imminent threat to life, imminent threat to property calls for service, so they can be there quickly, and looking at a better utilization of our facilities so that we're not building expansive entities anymore, but we're being much more smarter with our design, much smarter with opportunities for shared space, much smarter with the number of facilities, and making sure that our members are out in your communities building relationships with each one of you. That's our commitment.
Thank you very much. One thing we've heard loud and clear, and we continue to be reminded about it every spring, is when the Sunshine List is released. And there's a disproportionate amount of police officers on that Sunshine List. We have a conversation about money, and I'll tell you the one thing that we have benefited in this last progress report and transformational report with the external partners is that we have heard a path to find a way to be more affordable and be able to sustain meeting the needs of our community. So I'm going to call upon now former councillor and a mayor candidate over the years, Mr. David Zaknecki, someone who has kept us honest daily about what is the community's concerns and the angst within our budget. We have heard at different times about the actual staffing of the Toronto Police Services, that in fact 89 to 90% of that is our personnel, is actual budget line, is our salaries, our negotiated contracts. But one thing that we have to be able to do is still put police officers out on the street in order to meet the challenging needs of this complex city. So if you don't mind, I'm asking now that Mr. David Zaknecki can speak to, as an external, about how he's made sure that we are sharpening our pencil.
Thank you very much, Frank. I want to share with you, I guess, a story that I've shared a couple of times with the papers, that when I was asked by the mayor and Chair Pringle a couple of times to join this committee, I said I really wasn't interested because I wasn't interested in being part of window dressing. And I just didn't want to commit to something that there wasn't going to be change. And in speaking with the mayor, with the chair, and with the chief, they said that yes, we've done reports before, yes, there's been comments about change, but this time there is a commitment. There's a commitment not only from the service side, and you'll see, of course, many members of the service here, a commitment from council, which is the paymasters, but as well a major expectation from the public. And with all of those coming together, I said, okay, I'll come on and make sure not only there is a change in terms of the dollars and cents, but also a major transformation, we keep saying, in terms of how the police responds. That's got to be a great call, huh? Technology never interrupts. And so I came on, as well as a couple of other people that are semi-affectionately known as the externals on here. Adil Burrell, who has great credibility in her community. Michelle DeManuel, who runs 3 hospitals out in the west end of our city. And Jeff Griffiths, who is the former Auditor General of the city. Our goal is not only to make sure that the police continue to grow and support our quality of life, as I'm sure many of you will be seeing and saying, but it's also that we have the resources to, number 1, make the changes, and number 2, invest back into the community. And unless we're able to do that, we can't make the changes that many of you want and we need as a great city. So I came on, as did many others, and we've had a number of very vigorous discussions. Is this the report that a number of us as individuals would like to have written if we're the only ones? Well, no, of course not. But it's an acknowledgement that for us to make a lasting change, everybody needs to sign on and everybody needs to come together. I support the recommendations here and the changes we're making. The others do as well. The chair does, as well as the service, as well as the chief. What we've done is that we said we're going to be taking $100 million out of the police forecasted budgets so that, in fact, the city can be putting that money back in. If the goal was strictly a budget exercise, yes, one could cut more, but it's not. The whole purpose of the exercise is so that we can keep investing into our city. And so that's what's critical about this exercise, is that yes, there's dollars and cents in order to support the programs that we're all talking about here. There's also the savings because it has to be a credible transformation. So as the chair, as Frank have said before, we're here to listen. I will tell you that I've been attending most of these 10 sessions, and I have been certainly impressed with the passion and enthusiasm that people have come. I will tell you that your comments have come forward to our sessions. They are incorporated, they are listened to very seriously, and I'm certainly looking forward to the rest of the day. Frank, over to you.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to actually get into something that is a little bit more of a difficult conversation. And that conversation is about culture change. It's not lost on me that in St. Stephen's voice is that there still is a fear that when a police officer arrives that they're going to end up in handcuffs, they're going to end up on the sidewalk, they're going to end up in danger. And that's a problem. And I'm going to tell you right now, the one thing that bothers me the most is that the policing that I've been involved in over the last 35 years, we have made mistakes. We have missed opportunities. We have not always done what is right. But we have learnt from those. And the one thing I ask of you as we join this journey moving forward, and we're hearing this all across North America, is I want you to hear me loud and clear that I'm very confident, just coming out of 14 Division since May, that the young officers, the men and women that represent our service are incredible. The young faces and the diversity, the education, their engagement, their thirst for doing what is right. So what I would like you to do and help me moving forward is join me, first of all, as being the old cop in the room. For the mistakes we've made in the past, I am sorry. What we have to acknowledge moving forward is that young officer who's 6 months on, 1 month on, 18 months on, they are still responsible. We are all responsible for making sure we do the right thing. But we can't put the full burden of histories of some things that weren't correct on their shoulders. So we have to move forward. And the one thing that we have taken with great embrace and worked very, very hard on, and listened very, very clearly to, is culture change. I'm very excited to let you meet Shauna Coxon. Shauna Coxon will be taking this very, very large portfolio. So when we said earlier, does this stop the consultation? No. When we're talking about actually trying to change the culture, we're talking about changing the culture from a mechanical sense on the externals expectations of when I call 911 and they're not coming at 2 o'clock in the morning because there's a car alarm. There has to be a culture change in what do we do about that. If my car has a broken window and I want a cop there and I call 911, there has to be an external culture change. But there also has to be an internal culture change, that when you're actually asking for assistance, you don't become the victim. So we want to talk about that. Shauna, please come up here and tell us the exciting things that you're going to start doing to make sure that everybody's voice is heard in culture change.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing today? So I'm Shauna Coxon. Thumbs up over there. So I work in strategy management, and I've been on the task force as well. And I actually think this is such a big conversation when we get into talking about culture change. It impacts every single piece that you've heard about today. And you'll notice that many of the things that are coming up on the board about the way that people experience the police, you know, how they feel after an interaction with the police, this hinges on everything that we're talking about. And for that reason, I'm going to just go over a few things with you today and suggest that if you have any other questions or want to have a further conversation, that we can do it after. But we're looking at everything from how we recruit, who we recruit, the kind of skill sets that we're looking at. Part of the reason for the 3-year moratorium in hiring is that we really need to revamp this process. You're going to hear in the interim report, I know many of you read it and thank you for that, that the idea of moving from a warrior culture, or the idea of that kind of being the skill sets of police officers historically, to being a guardian, to being a partner in communities, to working more collaboratively. That's a completely different skill set that we're then looking for when we recruit. Next, we move into training. So what kind of things do we train on? We need to revamp this process as well. We currently have an RFP out right now to work with an academic partner in a permanent basis. We do academic partnerships all throughout the organization, but they're typically on one initiative. We want to work holistically with an academic partner to look at everything from accreditation, which is the process of professionalization that you see in other areas like nursing, and bring that into policing in a way that's never been done before. And then with that, also looking at, is the training that we're giving, is it working? So you're going to hear that we've given all different types of training in the past on things like racially biased policing. It's really important that we get these things right, and it's difficult to tell whether or not 5 years down the line, did that training make a difference? So really robust system of looking at whether or not the training we're giving is the right training, and is it working, and is it having a behavioral change on our members once they receive the training. So recruitment, training, all the HR processes, human resources matter in our organization, and they've all got to be revamped. So looking at things like, we're putting together a talent management strategy. This has been developed currently, so the next step will be implementing it, and that's going to look at everything from what kind of skill sets are we looking to promote. Just because you might be an excellent officer, an excellent detective, an excellent neighborhood officer does not necessarily mean that you'll be an excellent boss, someone who can drive leadership and innovation through the organization. So we're going to be looking at revamping that, looking at diversity and inclusion. Are we representative of the communities that we serve? Are we representative in all areas of the organization, not just certain aspects of the organization? So the HR process falls all throughout everything that we do. So training, recruitment, who gets promoted, how do we develop talent, what does talent look like in a neighborhood officer versus what does talent look like if you work in an investigative unit, and then being able to measure those things in a robust way. So how do we know that we're getting it right? You know, I mean, lots of organizations struggle with this. This is really challenging. And in policing, it's challenging because a lot of the things that might come from the corporate sector and be templated over to us don't necessarily work. So we're going to have to design some of this stuff from scratch. We have some great processes already in place, so we're looking at leveraging those even more. And what I'm going to suggest to you is you'll know whether we got it right when the experience that you have with an officer is what you were looking for. If you're here because you think that what you're experiencing is not what you were looking for, and you felt that it was disempowering to you and not taking into account your experiences, once that changes, once you actually feel that difference, that's when we'll know we got it right. So I think this is a process that's going to be a matter of ongoing change. We can't stop. This is something we're going to have to completely revamp and then continue to tweak and revise as we go along. But we're really excited about it because there's some fantastic opportunities there. So like I said, it touches on every aspect of everything that we do, and because of that, I think that for some of you it might need a longer conversation, and if you want to have that conversation after we're done with the Q&A, I'm more than happy to. So welcome today, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and your patience is well received. It's now your turn. You came here to be consulted. You came here to have a voice. We felt that we would just spin it a bit in order to give you some framework to be able to summarize what we have learned over the last 9 consultations things. So if you have a question now, if you'd like to ask something or as a follow-up, this is your opportunity. So who would like to speak? Give us one moment. Go ahead.
So I heard you talking about, implementing some different strategies. How do you gain trust? How do the officers out there take accountability for the interactions that they've had with a community that has already been broken by this?
Actually, I'll talk about that, and I spoke to Peter earlier about this. Right now, I think everybody is aware that Justice Tulloch is currently going around right now and having public consultations in order to look at the OIPRD, the SIU, other oversight bodies to see whether or not there is some changes, some opportunities. But the one thing that we do have is we actually have a very robust third-party complaint system, and we have other channels in order to do that. But it means nothing if the person is still not satisfied. It means nothing if, in fact, that after all of it is either unfounded or you feel that you've had no ability to have a voice after it. So what we are doing is we are looking greatly to what will be the changes in the Justice Tulloch review, but we're also looking at making sure then that, and I can tell you, even in our external consultations on Thursday, we also heard from our partners who are at the table right now that it's just too cumbersome. It's very, very difficult for someone to have a voice heard. So that's part of the culture change. That's part of the accountability. That's part of the transparency that we are certainly striving to do for. And we need you to continue to hold us accountable for that change. So that's a good question. Okay. Then you next.
I was at the first consultation, and I spoke mainly on mental health and addiction. I'm still a peer leader at St. Stephen's. Members of the MAC committee, we comprised our own survey with people who use our drop-in service and people that we do help in supportive housing. That's merely based on harm reduction style. So if it's okay, after I just finish my other few questions, if I could hand off to you guys. But a few of the things that I still am strong about our mental health and addiction. And if you guys are going to be doing community policing, which excites me a lot, because I would, as a harm reduction client former and as a peer leader who does a lot of harm reduction work at supportive housing buildings and at St. Stephen's Drop-In, if you have somebody who's an officer whose mainly role is with mental health and addiction, then we can work with agencies. You can work with agencies to help in situations like, I think one of our harm reduction buildings, towards the end of the month, check week, we might have a whole bunch of dealers that will appear, right? And a lot of our clients not necessarily will want to do drugs, but if drugs are available, and there are a lot of people who got mental health, and when they're pushed on upon them, and they're not really wanting to talk to police, but if we have a community police officer who's in charge of mental health and addiction, then through our workers we can try and push the dealers out, not so that people are not afraid of ratting or whatever the case is, and just have our clients live in a safe harm reduction style of living, and I think that way it can reduce it. Yeah, so I'm hoping that you guys can hopefully work a community mental health addiction officer into that community role of policing, and maybe some training on harm reduction. So like, I'm really excited that you guys have, I can't remember what the name is, but the officer that's going to be coming to meet with St. Stephen's, I'm really excited that you guys are willing to do that, and that it really excites me.
Thank you very much. As I said, we were certainly aware of this, and we did appreciate receiving your correspondence earlier. Jim, could you make your rep here as well? Jim is going to speak for a few moments. Jim has just come out of the community response at 14 Division. We absolutely agree. And we are talking about changing from just sitting within 17 bricks and mortar buildings to making sure that we can represent the needs within the 141 neighborhoods throughout this city. And there are many, many needs and many, many challenges. Jim, can you speak about some of the follow-up you're going to be doing with St. Stephen's?
I will. Thank you, sir. I will be coming and speaking to you on Thursday to get a little more direct feedback about your experiences and what we can do. But to the points that you just raised and referring to our goal to be where the public needs us the most, I think implicit in that is to be what the public needs us to be as well. So absolutely in certain neighborhoods, the needs will be different than others. And I certainly can't promise that we're going to have officers who are mental health and addiction officers, but that needs to be something that is in a given neighborhood a big part of their role. In another neighborhood, it might be something else. And I think you only know what's required when you're embedded and when you're there. And I know the officers in Kensington Market in Chinatown, I worked with them. I think they have a pretty good handle on some of the needs there. And when they can't do that, and the police can't be everything for everyone at all times, then that's where hopefully their knowledge allows them to reach out and say, yeah, this is a bit of a crime problem when the dealers show up on check day, but maybe there's some design issues, and maybe I can work with St. Stephen's, and maybe we can work with welfare, wherever the money's coming from, to create a new way of distributing the money so that we can sort of design out this problem. Because it can't be all up to us, but we certainly have a big responsibility to be like a hub and a focus and a collaborator that was mentioned earlier. So hopefully by being able to roll out that neighborhood model across the city, having people dedicated 3 or 4 years, they'll be able to do that and meet your particular needs wherever they are and whatever they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Question here, then we're going up to Dan Harrison, and then we'll go up over here and then over here. So I'll try and keep me honest. Keep me on there. Kick me as I walk by, and I'm like Dr. Phil. What were you thinking? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so since this is all about building trust, I want to settle this once and for all. There's this guy online, he doesn't like me very much, but he's really knowledgeable in the law. And the one thing that this guy, Scott Duncan, is really adamant about is he keeps on saying that the Crown is the surety for the person that we all have. Is that true? I don't know who wants to answer that question.
Within legislation and with authority, then it ultimately starts within law, if that's what you call common law.
The Crown, but not about that, but the Crown.
We're using language that's somewhat cumbersome, to be honest.
Maybe I can help.
But I guess it's either a yes or no.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the
Okay,
Crown
thank you.
lays the charge. It's not an individual that lays the charge. So when you break the law, you are breaking your relationship with the Crown.
So the Crown is the surety for the person we all have?
That's so the reason that he's saying that is the term surety. If you have someone who's a surety to get you out of custody temporarily, that's an individual, but they're making a bond with the Crown to get you out.
Okay, I'm not.
Does that make sense?
No, I don't.
Surety is very specific. So if you have a surety who's going to get you out of jail, that's an individual, because someone has to come and step up to be your surety to do that. But when charges are laid and what happens and everything, that's a relationship with the Crown. So I believe the answer to the question is yes, but if you want to have a further discussion.
You believe?
Well, because I'm not 100% sure I have your question right, and that's what I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly.
Well, okay. I was just.
Maybe she needs to get back to you in writing.
No, I'm happy to answer it now. The term surety, if it's a surety that you're asking about specifically, then the answer is no, that's an individual. If you're talking about the person who's charged, then the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that helpful?
That is.
We're just going to go up here and then come back. And then we'll come right back to you.
Thank you. Regarding the question of funding, if we were to follow the Bank Charter of Canada and have our 50% interest-free money, we wouldn't have some of the issues that we have today as far as funding. But that's not going to be anything that can be addressed on this level. But I think as citizens, if we were to address the federal government, we would have a greater degree of infrastructure in this country that was at least approximate where we are as far as a nation. Regarding mental health issues, the history of TPS and dealing with people with mental health issues is quite obvious. A friend of mine's brother was killed and he was involved in the inquest, and there was a program that was developed afterwards, which, 3 or 4 years now after the fact, still really hasn't been implemented, maybe in some textual ways, but as far as on the street, it's not quite implemented. But a broader issue and an individual issue as far as policing, I want to know, how much information does a drug dealer or one of these predators that's out on the street, how much information does he have to give up to get away with assaulting and raping people? Because that's what I see consistently. I see the bit players out on the street who get caught up in the game, who don't necessarily snitch, that wind up going to prison. They go through the mill. But those players that are out there that make it through all the raids, that seem to never get in trouble and they're protected, yet they are the most predatory, abusive people out on the streets. And they're not protected from God. They're not protected from any ancillary source. They're protected by the people out on the street that sit there and see them do their crimes day in, day out. So in the United States, you had an individual named Whitey Bulger, head of the Irish Mafia in Boston. He was the most rapacious, violent, murderous person in Boston. And the only reason why he was able to continue his reign of terror is because he had sanction by the FBI. On small levels, you have that in Toronto now. So the very problem that you have to police, you help create it by providing protection and prophylactic effect to criminals out there. What are you going to do to change that? Because if it's all community-based, how come certain people are allowed to stay in the community who abuse their fellow citizens?
So as I walk down, I think that question speaks directly to all three of the goals that we've been talking about all morning, with regards to really that when Suzanne Walsh talked about the neighborhood piece, increasing that familiarity with the people of the residents really kind of bridges a gap when you talk about the needs of the people, right? The needs of the community. A lot of times, like I've personally have gotten complaints about different community programs. So, for example, if the police, if a community response unit in a division is out doing a youth program, so they're out there doing a youth program, and it's all great, but the people that they're doing that with are not doing really good things when they leave, right? So, but I'm going to turn it over to.
Y'all can hear me. Look, we've got community officers down there in Sherburne and Dundas. Yeah. Okay, they know who's who, they know what's what. All right, yet they know certain people they cannot touch. And I want to know who's in blue that is protecting those people. How come those people are allowed to continue committing crimes? I don't care if you do drugs, that's irrelevant. I don't care if you buy or sell. But when you're raping and beating people, and you're killing them and you're assaulting them, and that gets a free pass, I don't care who you know. I want to know when are y'all going to be held accountable for that? Because there is a legacy of violence that's visited upon other people, and because they have mental health issues, because they may be economically disadvantaged, they may have communication issues, because there's nobody to voice any concerns for them, they're just a victim that disappears in the ether. Well, that same officer is protecting that same criminal doing their work day in, day out.
I can tell you that what you said is absolutely, I'm not going to dispute anything that you're saying. I'm not necessarily also going to acknowledge or receive as being a unit commander and having worked in the divisions that in fact that we're condoning behavior, but we have to work closer with Toronto Community Housing, with the City of Toronto, and making sure that these predators, and there are many, are relocated or removed from those scenes. We need to work with the judiciary, the crowns, and we need to be able to have the laws and the abilities to support that. I don't think it all falls on our shoulder. I'm not running away from your question, but I think it's a larger collaborative response to what you're saying. Because I can tell you as well, and I think you can understand this, even when we do look at the cancer within a building and trying to remove that one particular problem, as you know, the actual process in order to do that coming from the Toronto Community Housing and working with the different networks. The one thing that I am intrigued about, and I'm not trying to pivot to use a Hillary Clinton term, but the one thing I am concerned about is you had made reference to that we had out of an inquest a program that you felt at best is window dressing for the last 4 or 5 years. Are you referring to the mobile crisis intervention, or what are you referring to?
Actually, a personal friend of mine, his brother was killed. He was identified as being schizophrenic. There was an issue of subduing him, and in the process, he was killed.
Right.
He proceeded to do an inquest, and as part of the process of you probably know the individual, but I won't name him here. And he helped put the program together, the model of the program to deal with people with mental health issues. And just observing officers in 51 Division, a few have it innately, some are trying, but most don't get it. They really don't.
Yeah, that inquest, which is, I think, if I'm not mistaken on it, I think it's 6 years ago. I might be wrong, but also we've been fortunate that we've been given clear direction, and also working with the chair and as a mental health subcommittee to the chair, and the Ikabuchi report, which gave us some very clear directions. It has certainly changed what is the training the police officers are receiving. We do in-service training every year. We have to qualify for use of force options. I think you're also aware that we are one of the services that does not have the ability to expand the conducted energy weapon and to have other devices that are available. But what we are talking about, and from the inquest at Kabuchi as well as oversight, we have certainly changed our direction of approach to training, to de-escalation. And I can tell you that if you are seeing situations that's not occurring, then we can certainly talk afterwards, but I can put you in contact with what I chair is a use of force subcommittee, and I'd have no problem giving you a voice at that subcommittee to give us an opportunity to hear firsthand from a person who is providing support to the neighborhoods and see whether or not we are missing an opportunity. So I would welcome you to do that. Okay? I have no problem with that. And there's a question over here.
We're actually going to go here, and then we're going to go right there, because I think we both have to leave.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for this conference. This is my first time to attend this workshop. Actually, I want to just make some comment. With my experience working with TCAC, like volunteer tenor rep for 15 years, I always use community police, and I find a lot of solution. It's been resolved, but what I see that the engagement of the police in too many places is not good. Because, for example, just yesterday I was in an ANFA conference, and I've been in a session that the tenant got upset. For me, it's okay, he's welcome. LAPD from Los Angeles, that they are given a session with the sergeant of the police, and this session is rebuilding trust within tribal community. And it's same like this session. And some tenant, they got upset. Why? Why they come from Los Angeles to here? We need Toronto police, you know? And the focus in community policing is the solution. And this is what I know, because we are living in a diverse country, a diverse people, and everybody different. Some they scared from police, some they don't want to build up the trust, and this is too many issues. And I find, with my experience, the best solution is community police, and they have to put more budget in this program. For kids program, bicycle, I know Melissa, Farzan, Marchand, and this kind of police community, it's a solution. Now, I want this workshop to go to schools, to go to conference like here. Why we have to get somebody from America? He's more than welcome, but why? Like we're not doing this job. And I find it, and too many tenants, they cannot have a patient and he got upset yesterday. And my question, why this workshop is not known by citizen in the school, because before I see C2, D2 conference, and I see inspectors, they tell us about this workshop, they teach us to involve, and it's our right to have community police if we have a barbecue, and I go and I get them. But sometimes Arab, they don't know. School, they don't know. Too many places, they don't know, And this is my question, why you guys not engage in many places?
Thank you. I actually think we do have great engagements within schools. I can speak of what we do in the elementary school systems. I can speak of what we do with the school resource officers. We are now currently in over 50 high schools within the city, and we go around to the different communities. The crime prevention officers, the community relation officers, and the other thing that begs to be just clarified with everybody is that they are fully aware that we have community police liaison committees that meet monthly in every station. And that is an opportunity. I know certainly that you have attended. Do you find value at the community police liaison committee? Do you find you have a voice? You bring it back to the agency, that conduit. So I can certainly let you know that I believe with both Toronto Community Housing, having worked in Regent Park, having worked with Dan Harrison, Moss Park, I can tell you that you had a voice and there was a relationship. I'm not certain that's current. And if it's not current, then you need to remind us, and you need to go into the local divisions that we have and speak to those officers, speak to your neighborhood officers, the community response officers. We love to talk. We'll have no problem being able to facilitate a conversation, and that's one way we also learn. We do learn. Megan, could you help us, because we have some questions up there?
Yeah, we're just going to grab that lady over there.
I have a question.
I'd like to add something positive to this community engagement. I'm very hopeful for transformational police services as somebody who has been a victim of crime. I have now noticed a remarkable difference in the attitude from my local division, and that follows contacting the new Chief of Toronto Police, Chief Mark Sanders' office. As a result of new legislation, Bill 132, the Sexual Violence and Harassment Action Plan Act, that came into force on September 8, 2016, and I urge anyone who has an interest in public safety, security, and their own safety and their rights as a victim to read the act. It's not very long. It specifies criminal harassment, stalking, assault, and vandalism in the workplace and generally. Unfortunately, I fall into that category that is just specified as generally. So I'm not able to avail myself of any of the support systems and services for victims of sex assault, workplace harassment, or domestic abuse. I don't fall into that. But I'm very hopeful that the local police who have launched an investigation based upon my historic verbal and written requests to the police for intervention will allow me to be involved in a collaborative consultation with their investigation, because I've had very little involvement in it as yet. It's ongoing. I look forward to the results of that. There's some very positive feedback, but I'm at risk, and so are many witnesses, members of the public, members of the industry, where my stalker was employed, and my chief fear is that the investigation may be ghost-written by the stalker's former employer, a very powerful multinational corporation, their crisis counselors, and their legal teams, based upon fabricated evidence, rewritten inaccurate files, and erroneous inspections of reverse-engineered absurdity and speculative theories, based on his former employer's cover-up and deliberate destruction of evidence. And I have given the local police wealth of information, which is exposing me to possible repercussions in a civil matter. I've had to do this pretty much by myself. I don't feel I should have to, but I have to say I'm very positive that the police have given me some real support and reason for hope. Thank you.
Thank you for comments. We're going to go over here and then we're going to come back. Don't worry.
Thanks, Megan. Is it on? Yep. Thank you. I have a very specific question. What will you do to enact specific, mandatory, and non-discretionary police protocols to ensure police provide pedestrian management and safety at large gatherings of young people, thinking teenagers, particularly at events adjacent to major or busy roadways?
Help me on, I want to clarify that, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I want to clarify. So right now, I can tell you that when we are working with a rave, or working with certain things, and working with promotions and promoters, etc., we actually have a very robust protocol and what we are expecting for them to do. If it is something that is a public gathering that is governed by the Liquor License Act or the Alcohol and Gaming, we have a very robust and a very clear protocol. If there's something that I'm missing,
okay,
there's another layer to that. Can you just maybe get me right to there,
yes,
to that door? Because it's sounding like you're speaking about a specific,
yes,
and it might be larger than a rave.
Right. So before I do that, I'd just like to know what I've been told, and this is only hearsay, that the specific protocol is 5,000 or more. That's kind of the magic number, at which point, is that incorrect?
I'm only speaking of having just coming out of 14 Division, where we actually had 720 liquor license establishments, but we also had the CNE, we had music, we had other major venues, BMO, etc. So, in fact, our scale, if you will, about what we would think is a ratio of policing to response.
No, I'm not talking. Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not talking about ratios or anything like that. I'm specifically talking about traffic control and pedestrian safety at the beginning and particularly at the end of an event and during. The specific incident involves the death of my son, who attended what the police referred to as a massive beach party, and there was policing, planned policing for the event. The event did not have a license, but it was a planned policing event. Part of the plan was to shut down the party at 10 p.m., which they did do. It was adjacent to the Lakeshore Boulevard East, and all the kids were herded, for lack of a better word, towards the lakeshore. But there was no traffic, pedestrian safety control. And my son was killed by a TTC bus. So that's where this stems from. I don't know how many kids were there. The police were expecting 5,000. We never did get an exact number, except there is certainly evidence that it was in the thousands. So this was an event where the kids had been gathered for several hours. Not my son, it doesn't matter, the kids there. You know, the kids do what teenagers do. There was drinking, there was all kinds of, and then it was a free-for-all with kids all over the road because the police were focused on moving the kids away from the beach and the lake, right? And there was a gap. So that's specifically, I guess what I'm looking for are specific protocols related to teenagers, where if it's a magic number like 5,000, prior to that it's discretionary on the part of the police as to whether to provide pedestrian control. I'm asking that that number be re-examined and changed for events involving teenagers.
First of all, I do say I'm sorry for the loss of your son. I'm not just going to be specific, but I believe that predated actually my time as a the unit commander at 55 Division, and I'm certain that it followed, and it was something that we have changed. We've also created an opportunity to work closely with the traffic services. We've worked closely with the TTC in order to actually get an ability to move large masses of people. It's not predicated on a number, and I'm not able to say that it's a number that you mentioned 5,000, but subsequent to that, we have altered some of the responses that we were responsible, and we are responsible to make sure that there is the safe movement. That did come from a great deal of people moving north along off the beach area onto the lakeshore and a blind turn, etc. So I'm aware of that, and so I won't get into specifics, but we certainly have acknowledged, and I believe we have responded very differently as a result of that, because that was something that had not necessarily the resources to manage the after effect of that. I'm aware of that.
If I may just follow
Yeah.
up, are you saying though that it is still discretionary on the part of the police at the time? Because if you don't have a number, at what point does pedestrian safety and traffic control kick in?
Yeah, I don't think I said it was just the discretionary, but I'm certainly telling you in all confidence that it is part of the operational plan, and it is certainly something. Since then, we've also been able to deal with what we call TPOC. So we actually have now an oversight. So large venues, large activities, things of those natures, even if they're spontaneous, is that we have an incident command, and therefore we have a cadre of different responses and different commitments, and so therefore protocol in order to manage things that can happen. A lot of them, unfortunately, are organic, and a lot of them can grow very quickly based on social media, and they can cause crowds that we may not be able to control. Then we would use TPOC, which would then get city-wide assistance in order to respond accordingly to make sure that we don't make mistakes for looking after before, after, and making sure everyone is returned safely. So I'm aware of that.
So I would only follow up then by saying it is my request that you re-examine and have specific numbers and non-discretionary mandatory procedures for pedestrian safety for events involving TT.
And
that's my request.
I hear you loud and clear, and I actually would also say Frank Barreto. Frank Barreto, this is our network opportunity. Would you make sure that you exchange information, and then he can come back to you and give you some information about public safety and about some things that we are doing with regards to that. Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to come to Miguel, then we're going to come here. Okay.
1 minute, please. Let me set this up.
You want me to video you again?
Yeah, no video. It's okay, I got it. Sorry. Sorry, technology. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address this group of Torontonians who are really concerned about the police board and the services they provide to Toronto citizens. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Miguel Avila, and I have been coming to the meetings of the police board monthly, every day for the last 6 years. And I've been coming to the meeting of the city council here at this seat right here for the last 5 years. So I've been listening to what's going on at city level and at the police level board. So here today, I'm going to ask questions, having my good friend, Sean Scott, recording me. As you are responsible for the neighborhood response system or process, are you willing to make accommodations to increase support for people who have been victimized by police officers? Because currently out there is nothing to support a family or a member of our community who has been victims of police crimes. So if you're going to do a job to help those who have been victimized by members of gangs or etc., because I know I live in Regent Park, but we have to address the issue that we are not allowing people who have no places to go when they, one of them have been shot and killed by a member of the police. Where do we go? So that's something that we need to address at the city level. Secondly, I want to comment on the comments of Shauna. You talk about changing the recruiting process. You know that Probably you're aware, you watch the videos coming from the States, you know the States means John Forcella made that he was afraid for his life. So I want to let you know, if you're going to recruit people to work as a police officer, they don't have to be afraid for. If they're going to be earning $100,000 salary a year, they shouldn't be afraid for. If they are not the kind of people to working as a police officer because they are always afraid for their lives, please, they can work somewhere else. Maybe they can become mechanics, farmers, something else. But, you know what I'm saying? They always come at the court. This is a true story. They go to court and they tell the judge, why you killed the innocent man? It's because I was afraid for my life. So that's the reason we need to change the recruitment process. Give them external twists. Take them to the streets. If they really are not afraid for their lives and they're afraid to shot people, okay. Done deal, right? So we're going to continue the conversation. What else? Plastic shields. I mentioned this to Mayor Tory, and he probably should talk to Chief Sanders in that regards. Yesterday, someone lost his life. A member of police gave him a charge of electric conductor. We don't know if that person have some kind of health condition, right? That's what happened all the time. So that, instead of that, why don't we use plastic shields that's very popular in Europe and are able to control someone who has no nerves and nerves. I've been telling you over and over. And we can carry those shields in the cars. They have a truck, because they say, oh, we can't carry everywhere with a plastic shield, but they can have the plastic shields in the trunk of their car, right? Please, Brian, thank you. Can you say?
Thank you very much. Yes, the British police, I wonder if you're familiar with their technique in dealing with an individual who has a mental health issue and has a knife. They put on helmets with face shields, with a shield, and maybe a half a dozen of them approach the individual, try and pin him up on a wall or get him down on the ground. Are you familiar with this British technique?
You're very welcome. So, as I say, I already talked to the mayor, and he promised to talk to Mark Sanders and find some savings for the city. Now, in relation to the pay daily business, watching pothole for $67 an hour, can you review, please, the City of Vancouver system, because it can give jobs to so many others. I will tell this to the poverty reduction strategy, Councilor Panacono. I will tell this to the mayor, I will tell this to the police. Incorporate that program in Toronto, and once and for all we can have people who are really jobs do the same process of work. In relation to the vehicles, there are 14 vehicles who are currently assigned to sergeants to supervise those paid duty officers. So we have to get them out of the street, out of the bad budget, because if they do that, why don't they drive their own vehicles? Can we afford to drive their own vehicles if they're going to do a patchwork watching? That's my current saying. So, oh yeah, 911, that's the last one. I promise, this is the last one. 911, you call, they tell you, this is a reason to call a paramedic, a fire department, or police. Why don't we call one that says it's for mental illness, or etc. So they can dedicate people to send them over, like peer supporters. You guys have a lot of peer supporters in your house. You can be contact, and they can receive a good salary too. And help people in safe lives. Thank you so much. Oh, and I wanna comment one thing for the courage to say sorry for what happened in the past. Let's move forward. Yeah. Thank you, Miguel. Great order.
Hi, thanks. It's actually nice to follow Miguel because I appreciate that he's willing to speak out and be honest. And I think this is a hard forum for folks. And I work with people at St. Stephen's. I think that they should really be commended for speaking out, for having their photos taken and being in this Toronto Star. I think it took quite a bit to do that. These are people who have experienced very negative policing. And I am nervous going forward, frankly, that I know we talk about change, But how are we going to ensure that officers who don't follow their training are disciplined? How are we going to ensure that? That's the top of mind for me. I hear from our survey, which I helped tabulate, that people really want officers to be held accountable. They don't want to be profiled for race, for being homeless, for being substance users. They want to be looked at as people. And, you know, this is a huge police budget that we're talking about, and there is so little trust. For example, I'm so amazed that Toby is willing to meet and talk to you and invite you in. And I think we really need to look at the peer model as a way that you can engage with the community. I'm very concerned about the idea of plainclothes officers that I saw up here. That was not well received by some of our respondents. And we need much more accountability. I know there's a provincial review going on, but it has to start within the police force. And there was somebody who died from being tasered. It's in the paper today. Less focus on guns and tasers and more on using your voice and being engaged and de-escalating. Thank you. And shields.
Thank you. My name's Derek George, becoming somewhat of a celebrity. I didn't think homelessness and being a part of the St. Stephen's community would have the kind of impact that it has. When it comes to policing, I've seen all the different faces of Toronto police. There are good cops and there are bad cops. It's like anything else. They're people. Have a bad day, take it out on you. My issue is how they approach individuals who are disenfranchised, less fortunate. Most of the time, when you're approached by police, you're already nervous. The attitude of the police officer, it doesn't de-escalate, it escalates those emotions. I just had an incident a couple of days ago in a grocery store. The security asked me to leave. I was there to shop. I wasn't there to bother anyone, but I ended up outside the grocery store and in the hands of the police. For a simple, I have a tendency to think out loud. And someone took offense to me talking to myself. I was accused of harassing the woman. I didn't even speak to her. But instead of getting de-escalated, it quickly got escalated. And I found myself in the hands of the police. Now because I've been involved in all of this, I helped to de-escalate my own situation once I was in the hands of the police. Now, police have interaction with security. They have interaction with hospitals, places where they could take people other than to the station house to be booked for something that is probably not going to be pursued by the Crown anyways, it's going to get thrown out. But that individual has to go through that. And sometimes it's years. And I hear people talk about compensation. This individual hasn't done anything criminally. And he's not going to be compensated for loss of job, loss of apartment, the losses that he's going to incur. He's not going to get compensated for it. So my question is, how are these things going to change in the future with this whole... This conference is great. It gets people talking. But in order to see the changes, the talk has to stop, and the action has to start. And it's been years, as my friend reminded you guys. I sit here in City Council and I listen to Mr. Tory and the rest of them discuss discussions. The action. I'd like to see police have a better understanding of the issues and act on it. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I go over here, I will say that. So as I go over here, I will say that in the final report for the task force that's coming out in January, there will be definite implementation plans that you'll be able to see that actually does show that action. It does show that we've listened to what we've heard at all the different consultation sessions. We've allowed the community to have the input into the design of the future of policing in Toronto. So when that comes out in January, it's an exciting time, and it's a way for you, it's a way for the entire community to say and see that their input has actually made a difference.
The only I'll add there is that if you don't see a change, I'm responsible for that. So you have to tell me. I'll be honest with you.
Just have to get him, and then I'm coming to you next, okay?
My question is about community engagement and community policing. And Superintendent, you did mention the CPLCs, the Community Police Liaison Committees. Well, I'm on one of them in 42. 10 years ago, they were quite effective. But in the last 5 years, they've not so effective. It just seems like we're becoming spokespersons for the police and not the community leaders bringing community issues to the forefront. So that has to be addressed, and how the community engagement can be more effective. And on using that same model of the CPLCs, I'd like to see more civil oversight of policing, where the chair, the co-chair, the civilian co-chair, or a designate from the CPLC be on the Police Services Board as a oversight in every division. You have the Police Services, Mr. Pringle, you are on the chair, but there's only, 8 people on your committee? 7. So by having more oversight from the divisions, I think there'd be more accountability for the police, more civilian oversight. The police are also engaged in community outreach on their own and are bypassing the CPLCs. They sit on many of these committees that are run by United Way agencies like Malvern Resource Center and other agencies throughout, I know in Scarborough. And the CPLCs are not involved in that. They have a parallel outreach. So in order for the community policing to be effective, there has to be a standard way of approaching the community and community outreach. And then, Superintendent, you also mentioned hiring practices as well. I think one of the things that you should be focusing on in this report is when it comes to policing and teaching, have people with several language skills. I don't know what the numbers are, but there are a large number of languages spoken in Toronto. And if in your teachings in the police college, those languages that are spoken the most should be part of the curriculum, and also cultural training as well. That way, some of these things that these people have been addressing can be addressed right from the onset. And when the gentleman here, he mentioned many things. one of the things a lot of these people are getting a free pass. Well, the police are enforcement officers. They don't create policies. So part of the things that we can do as citizens is approach our MPs, MPPs, and city councilors to change the laws that the police enforce. But some of these, I know I've seen some of it myself. Some of these people do get a free pass. Like I can't give any examples, but I've seen people that should be in jail for a long time, but they get off because of technicalities, because of laws.
Brother, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people on the street that are engaged in criminal activity, that because they know other criminal activity, they turn around and provide that information to police, and they get a free pass on their behavior. That's what I'm talking about.
All right. I misunderstood. So these are my comments. And one more. And utilizing the auxiliaries in a more effective way. Again, that requires a policy change. Just gentleman, he's not there. Emmanuel, I think it was. There you are. You mentioned the guys watching the holes, construction holes. Well, some of the things can be done effectively through private security and maybe through auxiliary, but that again, that requires a policy change from the politicians.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much for your comments. I'll address your questions, your comments on governance. But thank you also for your involvement with the community liaison groups. It is an area, and let me actually back up. The whole process that the board initiated around modernization is actually one that is starting with this report, the vision report, and then the final report, and then the implementation. But it's also meant to be ongoing. So it's not going to be, we'll wait 5 years and do it, but it will be a continuous look at improvement. One of the things we know the excellent work of the community liaison groups and the CCCs. It's a question of how do we get some consistency across divisions? How do we utilize them better? I would say from a governance point of view, the Police Services Board is a construct of the province. The province requires every municipality to provide adequate and effective policing. The police services boards are different sizes dictated by the province depending upon the size of the community. So the Toronto one is made up of 7 people, and by legislation there are 3 appointed by the city councillors. The mayor is one of those currently. There are 3 appointed by the province, so the premier technically. And there is 1 appointed by the public, which actually is me in this occasion, which means I was asked actually by Mayor Ford to go, if I would do some community service. I said yes. You go to a website, you fill in the details, and then you're selected to come before the municipal appointments committee, which I did. So that's the makeup of the 7. The Police Services Act is under review at the moment, and there is a lot of opportunity to get input into them. You should do it directly. They certainly come to me. I think there needs to be a serious look at how we, the makeup of the police services boards, because there's not a whole bunch of rhyme or reason, for instance, that I can see to the selection of the various people serving on it. No one came to us, for instance, and said, what are the challenges facing the Toronto Police Service over the next little while before the province appointed the next person. Now, they have appointed good people, so it's not a question of that, but it is a question of how could we do better in the governance and the oversight body. And I'd encourage you to take your suggestions to the province, because the Police Services Act, last reviewed 25 years ago, is now being actively reviewed this year. So there's a chance to get that discussion into that debate. The other thing I would say is the board is actively looking at ways, and will be part of this discussion, about how we can involve the community liaison groups better. One of the suggestions that we've had is that perhaps we would get each group to come to a board meeting. So each month we would have a different group come and update us with how things are going in that division or with that community. So there are various ways that we're looking at accessing greater involvement at the moment. But I think one of the big things is, and it was brought up at the community consultation the other night, the consistency across the divisions of the community liaison groups and making sure that they all have the same skill sets and inventory of the assets in their community. Frank, do you want to?
The only thing I do want to add is that this year is the 60th anniversary of our auxiliary program. Right now we have 4 in the room. Would you join me in acknowledging the great work that our community members are doing for the Toronto Police? The other thing I did want to say, just to make sure that you are aware that all the information is being captured right now, by show of hands, how many scribes are in the room right now that are making sure? So in the absence of going through the yellow stickies on our boards with each areas that you are speaking about, I want to be very clear that they're gathering as much information from your comments to make sure that that is included in part of the consultations. Thank you very much. I believe there's a question here.
Hello. Hi. So I just wanted to touch more on this idea of neighborhood policing, and to the woman that spoke earlier about the plan or the kind of idea that's out there right now. Neighborhood policing is not a new idea, certainly. It's probably just reaching a new iteration, and I just wanted you to take some time to help me understand how this plan differentiates from the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, also known as TAVIS, because there's a huge focus on community mobilization in that plan as well, and a lot of people would argue that it's not very effective. And on just kind of to add to that piece as well, to talk about, I don't think we're really focusing on the stigmatization that a lot of these communities, and I use the word community very loosely because it's understandable that we're talking about very specific communities. We're not talking about Rosedale or Kingsview or Liberty Village. We're talking about, these neighborhood improvement areas that face, as a result, a level of stigmatization. So I want to know how we, not only as community members, but as a Toronto Police Force, help these communities come out of that stigmatization that they're faced with that label and this new neighborhood strategy.
Thank you. I will acknowledge right off the very bat that within the June and public release in July, it was very clear what the task force and what public consultation has said about TAVIS. So it's very clear. And I just want to also make sure that when I speak about TAVIS, I'm also going to speak about what we envision, what we currently do in our commitment to neighborhood officer deployment. So right now, currently in every division of the 17 divisions, there's at least a 4-person team that has actually committed to a neighborhood. What we are trying to do is we're trying to create an environment as we move forward that, in fact, 141 of the existing neighborhoods have an actual conduit to a police officer. I can tell you that with the first iteration, great use of your word, is the fact is that in 2006, when the TAVIS was born with the provincial supplement monies, that was in response to a great deal, an influx of gun violence. It was a true opportunity to try and deal with it. The shelf life of the TAVIS and the shelf life of how that had changed was certainly recognized in 2012 with the PACER report and looking at, in fact, what was then a decision to suspend the use of carding. Because what became the challenge within performance management, performance measurement, was blurring the line between output, numbers of interactions with people, to outcome. And we certainly heard loud and clear that there was a social cost to those interactions. So we have changed that. The one thing I don't want to lose is I do want to say that from PACER and from the incredible work and consultation that came out of that, we did change the model of TAVIS. And again, that was in 2012 into 2013. And again, right now, going into 2017, TAVIS will be disbanded. TAVIS is disbanded. I'll tell you the actual last deployment day of when they're actually, I'm going to go into one other layer here because this is an interesting thing to talk about. The one other thing that also comes from the disbanding of the Tavis unit is the return of 78 officers to frontline policing within the divisions, which then can supplement the neighborhood deployment to deal with neighborhood surge capacity. The other thing, and this speaks to what David Soknacki and other people want to hear, is that when we in fact disband a unit, or when we in fact potentially close a building that we're currently occupied, that real estate comes back to the city, comes back to the city coffers for redevelopment. If you're talking about a school board, they may find that a school is redundant. That sits back within City of Toronto real estate. Right now, as of January the 9th, in 2017, we are in fact returning 2 facilities, one on Kipling and one up on Finch, back to the city. So those are the side effects, if you will, that the bricks and mortar, the redevelopment opportunities, the opportunities to change these, looking at opportunities that maybe these facilities are better used as a community hub, maybe they're better used as a situational table, maybe in some cases they become housing. They become other use of that. So what you said is absolutely bang on. I have nothing to as a rebuttal, but I will tell you the commitment and the transformation that we see is returning police officer and resources to local policing. We right now find that the best relationship, and what we've certainly heard from St. Stephen's, is that familiarity. Derek George spoke very clearly that in fact if an officer knows who you are, they're better equipped to manage the situation as opposed to already prejudice the situation with an opinion based on what they have already assumed, as opposed to know the situations. So bang on what you're saying about neighborhood officers. Allow us to show you that we can deliver better, that we can get there. Thank you.
Okay, we're actually going to go over here for a question. Brenda?
Thank you. Superintendent Bergen, I am going to ask you for my letter back for just a moment, please, and then I'll return it to you, and I'm going to add something else to it. While you're getting that, I would just like to say to everyone that's present, Superintendent Bergen is the only person I have ever met that is a police officer who has ever said, "We made mistakes and we're sorry." The only person that has ever said that, and I've been making complaints since 1982. And the story has always been, we haven't done anything wrong, none of our officers do anything wrong, you're not telling the truth. I've heard that so many times I've lost count. So Superintendent Bergen is truly a breath of fresh air. I do want to tell all of you that I have been at a previous meeting. I have spoken personally to Mr. Pringle, who was very kind and listened to everything I had to say, for which I'm grateful. I scratched out a bit to give him today. Mr. Pringle is the only one I've ever known that was on the Police Services Board that would give anybody the time of day. So he's to be commended, along with Superintendent Bergen. Now, I did also get a chance to speak with our Chief of Police, Saunders, who I went up to. I also wanted to hear what I had to say. I told him I had a very serious problem, I needed help. He directed me to Greg Watts, who is the person standing here with the microphone. Greg Watts immediately told me to call Suzanne Walsh. She'd know what to do. Suzanne Walsh has stepped aside to take care of the task force. I was directed to someone else I'd never met, never spoken to, who said she wanted to know what I wanted an appointment for. I made the mistake of telling her. She then said she didn't believe me. I'm not telling the truth. There will be no appointment. She's not the only person who talks to me like that. I find it very disturbing. I believe that what's transpiring at these consultation meetings is not trickling into the police divisions. It's not even trickling into police headquarters. So I agree with most of what's been said here, but we're all in agreement with each other. So we're all talking to people that agree with each other. You agree, you want to listen, Greg was helpful. It wasn't his fault that I was graded in this bizarre fashion, but these people have a mindset. And the mindset is that when you talk about the police as a member of the public, you're a liar. You're not telling the truth. So when someone starts with the idea that you're not telling the truth, it can only go downhill from there. Well, I don't need to see any documents, I don't need any photographs, I don't need to hear from you. I know you're not telling the truth. Here's how I know. If you were telling the truth, someone would have already helped you. So you can't be. That's number one. Number two, I know who you're talking about. He's wonderful. Well, here's the problem. Just because you know people, you work with them, does not mean they're wonderful. They may be wonderful to you, because obviously they work with you, they want to get along. But that doesn't mean they've never made a mistake. And the thing is, once someone makes a mistake, they don't say they're sorry, or, oh, gee, I made a mistake, I'll fix it. We say we're sorry, oh, what did we do? We'll try to fix it. But the police say, we don't know what you're talking about. We didn't make a mistake. It's you. You make up stories about us. So what's the problem and how to fix it? Stop talking, as Miguel and all these other people have told you. Stop talking. Start doing. Let's see some doing. So I put up a request on the bulletin board and said, please, can someone immediately be chosen from headquarters to receive the public with complaints? Because the complaint service is not working. My complaint was lost. I then noticed, I redid the complaint, there was an equipment failure. I've put all of this in writing, so I'm now going to make the same complaint for the third time. But here's the problem. The law says you can't make the same complaint because the time limit is up. So you have to have something else to complain about. You can't make the same complaint. This is extremely distressing. It means if you were talking about a robbery, murder, a rape, well, too bad for you because your time is up. You didn't get your complaint in on time, so guess what? You're not making it. No one will listen to you. And that is a very serious problem. No, it was not Greg's fault. He thought he was helping, telling me to go to professional standards. But I've been to professional standards before, and I thought, oh, great, okay, now they've got a new attitude. I'm sure they'll help me. The attitude has not changed. Nothing's changed, only the date. So we can have the reports. I'm grateful for Mr. Pringle. I'm grateful for Superintendent Bergen, for our new chief of police, but no one's listening to them. And I want to bring to their attention that the rank and file are not listening. So back I went to the police at 13 Division, the same police division I've been complaining about since 1982. Nothing has changed at 13 Division. Only the faces. Same attitude, same way of doing things. In fact, they played a little joke on me last community police meeting. They didn't have a room on the ground floor, and instead of sending a group to another location, they decided that they would see if I could make it up the steps. When I couldn't make it up the steps, a stranger helped me get up the steps. The offer was made from the head of 13 Division, why don't you go home and we'll keep you informed as to what's transpiring. I said, no, I want to speak. No one is listening that you think are listening. And some of the people are doing, they're trying to help you, they're behind you. Suzanne Walsh over there, Shauna over there. She's repeated some of the things I put in this letter, and I've never met Shauna. I haven't read the report, but strangely, some of the things that were said today is what I just wrote in my letter to Mr. Pringle. I'm so happy that he's here today. I know that the chief would have liked to have been and wasn't. Happy that I know Greg, but the thing is, Greg is not available. I've been looking for him 3 times at headquarters. Greg is very busy. He's a busy man. So I'm going to again request for everyone, not just for me, what is the person, who is the person that we can talk to at police headquarters that never mind listening. We don't need people who are just going to sit and nod their head and listen, that are actually going to take it upon themselves to find a detective to help them investigate what we're saying. Because what I'm saying, I'm talking about police corruption, I'm talking about fraud, I'm talking about threats from the police made to my family and to me. I better stop complaining. I better stop it, or here's what's going to happen to me. And I want everyone to know what the threat is, because I am afraid something's going to happen to me. Something already has happened to me and members of my family. And when I brought this to headquarters, when I even hired people to write to the chiefs of police, no one answered. I was completely ignored. The police years ago came to my house, took me away off my own property, telling me I was a trespasser, threatened my mother who was crippled, threatened my daughter who was a child, threatened us. We are trespassers on our property, and when they come back the next day, we better not be there. I was taken away to jail in handcuffs in front of all the neighbors, and just after one of our neighbors had attacked my daughter and myself, which was a regular daily event, he was left on my property laughing, and I was told at the police station that one, I'm a trespasser, and two, I'm guilty of assaulting my neighbor that I was trying to fight with, who had attacked myself and my daughter. Now, obviously, you can all see me. I'm 5 feet tall. I was trying to fight him off, but I'm going to tell you, I was not succeeding. The police did not come over to help me. Although we'd called the police, we'd also called bodyguards we'd hired. We are a poor family who had to take literally the food out of our mouths to hire bodyguards to help us because the police would not defend our family. We are a mixed family, and in those times, you are not a white person married to a Native person. That didn't happen, and Superintendent Bergen has shared with me a personal story, so he will identify with what I'm saying. People did not, there's no white and black people, there's no mixed families, not in my neighborhood, not if you knew that was good for you. And so, of course, I was a human rights activist, and I'm saying, hey, we've got rights to what we want, we're born in Toronto, we're from Canada, etc., etc. And I was surrounded by immigrants telling me, throwing things at us, hitting us, spitting on us, calling us filthy names. And so while they were protected, just as the gentleman up here said, the police do protect certain people. And I don't care if they're squealers or who they are. The police are protecting people that should be in jail. Not one person but me in my neighborhood that I've complained about as having attacked us, destroyed our property, etc., has spent 1 second in jail or has even been taken away to the police station. I was going to ask Mr. Pringle if he would let me speak before the police board. I went looking for Mr. Pringle. I get on my Wheel-Trans and I go looking for people because I've given up calling them. Unfortunately, the day I went, Mr. Pringle was absent and another gentleman was in charge of the police board meeting. That was the last one. And I was very upset not to see Mr. Pringle. I felt that Mr. Pringle was open to hearing what's really going on in the city of Toronto. Because the things that you're, all these little post-it notes, they're very polite. Most people are scared of the police, and they're not going to tell you word for word what they'd really like to say. I'm scared, but I'm still telling you. Here's my threat. A couple of months ago, a very high-placed policeman at 13 Division warned me I better keep quiet and stop complaining. I better stop sending my documents and my photographs around town. I better stop appearing in places, or here's what's going to happen to me. He is going to make me look crazy. He's done it before, he said, and he'll do it again. And he then turned his phone around, turned on his camera so he could video me, and he said, I know how to push your buttons. I'll make you look crazy, and if you think that you've had trouble before, I will have it so that you're not here anymore. Followed up with my neighbor. My neighbor has told me numerous times, we are going to have you taken to the mental hospital, and that is going to be your new home. I've gone to the police station with all of these stories, been ignored. I've written a letter to Police Chief Blair, who ignored me. I started writing to Police Chief McCormick, and went all through the line. The worst police chief that I had to deal with was Fantino, the worst of them all. The best one was Policeman Saunders, who actually answered coherently and politely and thought that Greg was going to be able to get some help to look into some of what was going on. But some of these issues have to do with criminal activity that the police are involved in. When I came in here, Superintendent Bergen came up to greet me, said he recognized me from another meeting, gave me his card, and offered to let me call him and come to see him and tell him what it is I'm talking about. And thank God I've saved some of the documentation because I have recently been informed in the last few weeks from OIPRD. Not only is my latest complaint missing, which cost me $450 to get the documents together to give them, not only is that lost and missing, but they have never heard from me before. That is just absolutely ridiculous. So I'm grateful for Superintendent Bergen. I'm grateful to Mr. Pringle. I'm grateful to Greg. Suzanne Walsh over there seems to have a handle on neighborhood policing. Shauna seems to have an idea of what we should do when we're recruiting. There is one negative thing I've got to add. The stuff about diversity. We've got black policemen, brown ones, we've got the Asians. There is no black policeman. There's no brown policeman. We don't have any Asians. We've got everyone who is blue. All the police are the same. And in order to correct that, you now need to put your heads together and figure out what we're going to do about that. Because there is no difference. There's no cultural understanding. They're like robots.
Whatever one says, they all agree with, and that's the way it is. I go to all the CPLC meetings. I'm always at the community meeting, and I always get somehow raked over with coals. I'm the only person who's telling it like it is, and everyone else is yelling, they love the police and blowing kisses. It's not that I don't like the police. I'm talking about a specific division. I have never had a problem with another division or police from any other location. It is always the same people from the same place. But we are the vicinity that used to be covered by Charles Roach, Dudley Laws. We're the people with scandal after scandal after scandal in 13th Division. And no matter how many scandals there are, we keep on rolling along like nothing happened. And what has happened lately is this.
Greg, could you please take that for me? Picture of a policeman that I just complained about. I was told that I've got bad perceptions because I have mental problems, apparently. So I carry a letter with me from a doctor saying I don't have any mental problems, and I'm about to get letter number 2. After just saying that this man was a smart aleck, he was in the newspaper for stealing food from a local cafe. We also are the home of the only policeman ever charged and convicted of robbing an armored car. I could make a list of everybody that came from 13th Division. It's a bad, rogue police division that should have been under scrutiny years ago. And no matter what has happened, all the shootings, this and that, the dead bodies, threatening old people, cripples, children. My daughter, when she was a child, got thrown out of the police station when they said they didn't want to hear what she had to say. So they threw a child out of the police station, if you can imagine. A child going to a police station for help and getting thrown on out. I welcome this, but I'm going to say as my last comment, this is not good enough. I want to wake up tomorrow. I want to call you and make an appointment to see you, and I want to know who, other than poor Greg, who's never in the station because he's got his duties. Greg told me I could call him if I needed help, and I'm grateful, but Greg has duties. That puts him out of there, and so do the rest of you. So who is the person, if you can decide between when I call you tomorrow, or Monday, I guess it will be, Monday, excuse me, who is the person that is not just going to listen? I'm grateful that people are listening to all the speakers, but who's going to do something about it? Who's going to say, make a telephone call and say, look, I've just seen a document that indicates this woman was defrauded and the police helped defraud her. Like, what the hell is going on here at our station? We're moving forward with a new plan for community policing, which, by the way, one of the speakers was quite right. We had community policing when I was a little girl, and it worked very well. We had Neighborhood Watch. Last time we had a meeting that I attended, I said, please bring back Neighborhood Watch. Please appoint someone to be at City Hall that we can run to, because when you are threatened, did you know that the police complaints process cannot protect you? And will not. You have to get your own protection. And if you're poor and you can't pay a $400 a day lawyer, $400 an hour, what am I talking about a day? $400 an hour lawyer. Some lawyers that I've spoken to are also afraid of the police at 13th Division, which causes me to say to you, why is everyone so scared of the police at 13th Division? And nobody's looking into, gee, what's going on over there? When if we were to take my files alone and go over all the police that have been arrested from 13th Division or held up to public scrutiny, how are they all from one division? We seem to hear about 2 police divisions all the time, and the rest, all you hear about are good things. Well, we love them. So I'm putting to you, there is a problem. The police at 13th Division went rogue a long, long time ago, and it's more than past time for them to be investigated, not moved around to other stations so that they can spread poison to a good police station. And I believe that the good police, that is our ethical, wonderful police, are scared of the bad apples. They're frightened of them. They're a dangerous component, and they should be removed from the stations. Thank you for listening.
And I do look forward to a conversation. Call me on Monday. And I will say as well that all this is for naught, that if 2 o'clock in the morning the police officer isn't aware of these type of conversations. If that is the face or our ambassador that is showing up to service your call, but they're not aware of all this important things that we've heard about today, then we've failed. It's our responsibility, it's the chair's responsibility, it's Greg, Suzanne, Shauna, and the whole team here to make sure that your voice is heard. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much. So the time, I just want to make sure that everybody has a voice, that everybody has an opportunity to speak. Greg, is there a couple more?
There's one right here.
All right. Go ahead.
Hi, I would just, my name is Bruce Pope. I'd just like to ask that there's a voice by the association, by the officers themselves, that there's a voice to the public in sessions like this over the next year or years that affirms that they've been chatted with, that they've been a part of the process. We had a multi-year process on carding, and decisions were made on changing carding. Laws were passed on banning carding. And that after that, we get the protest from the associations, plural, that there's a threat to safety. There's this and there's that. And so there's a need for more consultation before next contracts are made. We don't have to have those kinds of delays. Let's make sure that officers representing the union are speaking to us that yes, we have been involved. And there are problems. You don't have to talk about what the problems are. I'm not asking you for negotiating contracts in public, but I am asking you to show us, not tell us, but to demonstrate that you've been talking in the open with the union.
Thank you.
Yolande Davidson from the Jamaican Canadian Association. I actually wanted to touch upon some of the things that the community member beside me touched upon, specifically in relation to the rank and file as it pertains to bias within the police services. Shauna, you mentioned that there's a lot in the works in terms of academic partnerships and performance management plans and things like that, and that bodes well for people coming into the force, but I'm also really concerned about people who are already there, as has been alluded to previously. And I think it's really critical, and I think it's a public statement that the police service needs to make to acknowledge that bias exists within the force, and to let us know as the public what sort of critical lens is being turned around on the rank and file throughout the organization, actually from every level, to examine the biases that exist in terms of race, in terms of mental health status, in terms of socioeconomic status, all sorts of different things, because at the end of the day, this is only going to work if those people who are the boots on the ground buy into this. So they need to acknowledge, we all have our biases, they need to acknowledge that there is a problem, there are systemic issues within the force, and that it's not about them, it's about the organization evolving to a better place, and that requires everybody to have a level of investment in all of this. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nia Singh. I'm a community advocate, student at law, and citizen of Toronto. I first of all want to commend you, Superintendent Bergen, and the rest, and Andy Pringle, and the rest of the police force for doing what you're doing. I think it's a great positive step. But as we're here speaking about the real issues that are happening, I feel it's my responsibility also to communicate things that have been happening firsthand on the ground with civilians and the Toronto Police Force. The lady beside me mentioned about how frontline officers have to be accountable. I heard Shauna mention it, and I think that's the real crux of why we're here today and why the culture change has to take place. Everything in the transformational task force is great. There's a lot of good things, but if the officers on the ground don't understand the importance of how they deal with people and how to respect people and how their position as a police officer is one of respect, honesty and integrity, we're going to continue to have these problems. And I really implore you, when you're finalizing the report, that lens keeps, that the connection and the nexus keeps coming back to, are the frontline officers going to treat people they encounter properly? I want to give you a few examples. Just this week, I consistently get calls from the community. Just this week, a man was stopped for an improper signal change. Then he was asked for identification. Then his car was searched. And then he was arrested and charged. And then he had money in his wallet for rent, and it was counted in front of him. Yet when he appears in front of the court and they count the money, a third of that money is missing. This is a serious problem that's been happening throughout the force. I hear it all the time. I hope that you're aware of it, and I hope that this transformational task force and the board starts to really look down upon this behavior. Because what's going to happen is when this person makes a complaint to the police and said, this amount of money was here, I counted it, yet this amount is reported, it's most likely not going to be resolved. Another story. I was called on a Friday night with a female screaming because police were coming to her house, 6 officers, looking for someone who doesn't even live there, who's a friend of her son's, and harassing them. She was crying in tears and says, I cannot take this anymore. Why do they keep harassing me? And the level of her discontent had me in fear that her screaming would somehow escalate the situation, even though she was the one being targeted. She told me that the officers stood around and laughed at her as she was going through this. Right? There's another story of a man from St. Stephen's community who was stopped recently and accused of selling drugs when he just met up with a friend briefly. He was stopped, he was arrested, he was cuffed, and his contents were gone through, and he kept making this point to me. He said, the officer didn't go through my bag and take things out. He threw everything across the street, right? And he said to me, what's going to happen when I see that officer again? And these are the type of things that are happening daily. I'm only getting a fraction of it. A lot of people in this room are privy to it. But it's really important that the frontline officers are the ones that are hearing these conversations, that are invested in it. And one final point, you mentioned new officers, young and promising officers. And I'll say again, I've met a lot of good officers. Last night I spoke to a detective investigating something who was very helpful, probably one of the most helpful officers I've ever encountered when dealing with a client situation. But what's happening is that the community is losing a lot of trust, as we know, but officers really have to be accountable. And if we don't have in our plan, transformational plan, that they will lose their jobs when they commit certain offenses, criminal activities, I'm afraid that this will perpetuate. But back to the final point about young officers. Unfortunately, young officers watch a lot of movies, they watch a lot of TV, and the past negative practices of police have educated them on how easy it is to get away with abusing people's rights. And some officers, and I hear it, when they're going into training, they speak to people and say, yeah, I'm going into the force so I can beat some people up. And I think at the recruiting process, that really has to be examined as the integrity and intention of why they pick up the badge to serve the community.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you. Well said. I will comment that yesterday we actually had the task force meeting starting at 8 o'clock, and the externals who were there, Mr. Saknaki, our chair, Adil, and others who joined us by the phone, did in fact call upon the superintendent of the professional standards unit, the superintendent of training, the superintendent of our human resources, the superintendent of evaluations, talent management, and in fact they were called in front of the task force to speak of the current state, to talk about just what you said, the future, and how do we get there, and what are we going to do. So it is not lost on us that what you said is absolutely something that we're talking about today. Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Nadia, and I work with the peers at St. Stephen's Community House, and I just want to thank them all actually for coming out. And you know, it's a Saturday; they're not getting paid for this time, and I think them coming out shows their commitment and their passion to, help be part of the creation of positive change in the community. And I just wanted to speak about, the importance of recognizing lived experiences of people as like very important and meaningful qualifications in helping to support and create this change. And I think, us being here and getting everybody's input is great, but I think that even when it's implemented, I think, the people who have had these experiences with the police, the people who are willing to work with the police and be part of creating that change, I think it's very important to have them be part of that. I also just want to talk about the importance of, when we're looking at approaches to helping create this change, the importance of incorporating concepts of harm reduction into creating that change. I think a lot of people hear harm reduction and they think about substance use and they think about enabling substance use. However, the concept of harm reduction is, reducing the harms associated with specific behaviors. And in this case, what the concern is the behaviors of the police, right? So the concepts of harm reduction can be used towards anything. And I think incorporating harm reduction is not punitive, and it starts with wherever we're at in the process. And I think it's super important to learn about these concepts. And even in the training that the police officers are getting, harm reduction talks about using very neutral language, right? We've had, we work with people with, addictions and mental health issues, and the amount of times we've called police or even EMS and, we have people referring to people as drunks or alcoholics, right? Like it's just not okay. And sometimes just the language can diffuse a situation. And, I heard that you guys are getting like de-escalation training, and I think that's great. But I think that the training, I don't know what type of training you guys are getting, but I think it's important to have training that's very specific to the types of interactions that you guys are going to be having with people. And I think incorporating harm reduction into that is very important and can be very helpful.
Thank you, Nadia. So in the interest of time, we're going to have, we're going to do 3 more questions. We're going to go here, then we're going to go up there, and then we're going to end over here. So I know that there are people that do have questions. When we finish for the day, the task force members will stay. We'll stay behind. So if you have questions, please come up to us afterwards and ask your question. There's also the availability to go online. If you go to tps.on.ca /have your say, you can upload your suggestions. You can upload a video suggestion if you like. There's also a self-facilitation guide that is published today online. It's been out there for a while now, where if you wanted to host your own session, all the information and the materials for you to do that are there, and then the mechanism for us to receive it as well.
So firstly, I just wanted to thank everyone here from Toronto Police Service who took their time on the Saturday to be here to educate the community and answer questions from the community. The question I had specifically surrounds around the 141 neighborhoods that have been identified as the ones that can have the most potential for impact within the neighborhood community profile. I wanted to understand how those neighborhoods were identified, what metrics were used to identify them, and then what will be done to ensure that as this program grows and evolves, that the additional support necessary or perhaps no longer necessary to support the neighborhood will be provided or moved to another location. The other sort of complementary question was, great news to hear about the 78 TAVIS officers that will be redeployed to areas of need. Similarly, how will TPS define area of need to ensure that the officers are deployed to locations where they can make the greatest impact on the community?
I'm going to start with that while Greg takes the microphone over to the Scott McKean, City of Toronto. We didn't come up with the neighborhoods, the City of Toronto neighborhoods. I also have been advised that even in council next week, they're starting to speak of potentially maybe even additional 3 neighborhoods. That's another conversation. Scott will speak to that, but I will speak about what we do when we look at redeployment is with data analysis, crime analysis, we certainly have a handle on where we need our resources, and then we will make decisions on staffing based on where those people, the 78 that are taken from Tavis, are redeployed back into the field.
And maybe one question on neighborhoods. There are neighborhoods that are going to bridge to police divisions.
Yep.
How will that be addressed in neighborhood security or policing as well?
Okay, so before I hand the mic to Scott McKean, so traditionally, the Toronto Police, we operate via 17 divisions, right? And that information was, those boundaries were based on a lot of information, a lot of crime-related information, demand for service. Through the Transformational Task Force, we've kind of taken a step back and said, okay, what would it look like if we were to actually align ourselves with the City of Toronto neighborhoods? You know, Scott will talk about what information went into making those neighborhoods. So realistically, when the Transformational Task Force got put together in January, it was a whiteboard approach. It was a blank slate approach to policing in Toronto. It was a rebuilding kind of effort. So when Suzanne Walsh talks about neighborhood officers, and you're right, we do have a neighborhood officer program today. We do. However, the future of that should evolve into a much broader approach to the neighborhood officer program, right? Identifying, working with the City of Toronto to say, okay, these neighborhoods were identified for a bunch of amazing different reasons, and a lot of really great metrics went into that. So how can we then embed officers into those neighborhoods? So forget about the traditional boundary lines, right? Yeah, because you're right. Today, one neighborhood might touch 2 different divisions. But in the future, that might not necessarily be the case, right? So I'm going to now turn it over to Scott.
Hello, everyone. My name's Scott McKean, and I do community development and safety work here at the city. I work for the City of Toronto, and I've worked with a number of you in the room, and it's great to see the St. Stephen's people here, and Miguel, and all the region people, Sherburne and Dundas. So I'm going to just talk about a few things quickly. When it comes to neighborhood selection, so we have a strategy inside the City of Toronto called the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. And to develop that strategy, what we did is we used a health and well-being monitoring tool. And basically, we looked at the health and well-being of all 140 neighborhoods across the city. The city is divided into neighborhoods specifically for social planning purposes. So many moons ago, our council approved that we adopt 140 neighborhoods in the city. And that allows us at the city to look at what's happening in the neighborhoods and being able to monitor what's happening at the local level. And so when we looked at the health and well-being of the 140 neighborhoods, we looked at 5 areas. We looked at economic opportunities, the physical surroundings in those neighborhoods, the population health, the economic opportunities that are there in the neighborhoods, and then we looked at residents' ability to participate in decision-making within those neighborhoods. And so to be able to do that, we had a whole long list of indicators, and we had to look at data that was available from every one of those neighborhoods. And similar to this process, we talked to neighborhoods across the city. So we talked to thousands and thousands of residents, and we ran this tool, and that helped us determine the neighborhoods. So when we ran this tool that we have, we identified that 31 of the neighborhoods were considered to be below what is an equity benchmark. So you heard over here someone talking about neighborhood improvement areas. So we identified 31 neighborhood improvement areas. And so we developed a strategy that services all neighborhoods that has special attention on those 31. So what Toronto Police is doing is looking at how do they best align with all 140 neighborhoods, because they service the entire 2.7 million people that live here, and how do they modify their service to make sure that there are readily accessible and available officers on the ground in those neighborhoods who are your point people for service delivery. And so that's how it connects into city services. Yeah, so economic opportunities was one of the main factors in looking at the health and well-being of neighborhoods. And as part of the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy, all city divisions have been tasked with looking at how do they really modify their services to have specialized service delivery in neighborhoods that are in need. And so economic development and culture, which is one of the divisions in the city, where that's where the business improvement associations are run out of. They have a special position now that's looking at business development in the neighborhood improvement areas. So that economics business was one of the domains that we selected our neighborhoods from. While I have the mic, I'm just going to take 2 quick seconds because I think I really got a lot out of being here today. So first of all, thank you for that. But I heard a lot of questions about police oversight, and I know that there's been a couple of mentions about the process that's going on. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that this Thursday, which is November 10th, at Metro Hall in room 310 at 6 p.m. is the police oversight consultation. And so this has to do with the Special Investigations Unit. It has to do with the Office of Independent Police Review Director, and it has to do with the governing civilian bodies that oversee those groupings. They're actually evaluating police oversight. So I heard some questions about complaints. I heard some questions about what to do when, if an officer assaults someone in the complaint process and the services available for them. This Thursday night at Metro Hall, there's a discussion specifically about that. So I encourage you to, if not attend, tell your friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Scotty. Okay, for the final 2 questions, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go over there.
Okay. Thank you so much, first and foremost, for organizing this. And I guess my question is, I'm really happy to hear about this vision of collaboration with the community and kind of seeking this new vision for policing for Toronto. At the same time, though, I don't necessarily feel, just looking at this consultation, I don't necessarily see many members of specific communities present here. For instance, youth. I'm seeing a lack of youth here. And so if we're having community input, I'd really like to know what's going to be whether or not there's going to be continued input, not just with regards to accountability, but with regards to more strategy and decision making, and what's going to be done to ensure that all members of the community, for instance youth, will be present there with regards to that.
Yeah, and as I walk over here, I'll do my best to answer that question. You're right. All the consultation sessions that we've had, that has been a concern in that there really hasn't been a lot of youth that have come out. So one of the things that we've done to mitigate that is to create that self-facilitation guide. And then with the help of Scott and his folks in the community development unit, we actually had a session with a bunch of youth outreach workers to show them how to use it, how that they can then conduct this exact same session with the people, with the youth in the communities that they kind of represent. And we're really looking forward to getting that information back. That's one thing. And it was mentioned earlier that even though this is the last session for this kind of round, the community consultation doesn't end there. Right? We will be back out as we move forward with the implementation of all these different things. We'd be remiss to not come out and not get increased continued feedback. Absolutely.
Something about today, and the first conversation I went to is that it's not like these different areas like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ community, youth. It's not like they're hiding. So it's not like you guys have to, it's not like people are hiding. You guys can just go to like the Black Lives Matter community. You guys can go to the LGBTQ community. I haven't seen any type of talk about that. I don't see any representation about that. I was just talking about youth. It's not like the youth are just going to straight up and come. You guys can go to like the, go and figure out from the city of Toronto where the youth are. This is the first time I've been hearing about the oversight thing for this Thursday. Honestly, you've done some improvement about publicizing things, but it's not like people are hiding. It's put over the news. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. For us, for the first consultation, we heard about it 2 days before we got there, and I think somebody at that first meeting said even the people there did not know about that thing, and I remember you being there. So I'm just wondering, you guys, it's not Toronto Police. It's not like we're hiding.
Whoever did the outreach for this really dropped the ball. I'm kidding, because it was me. But we did a ton of outreach to get the word out about all the different consultation sessions. We advertised it widely throughout the entire city. We actually used Scott's network within the city of Toronto as well to get as much information out there as possible.
So why is there a representative from Black Lives Matter, LGBT community, youth community?
It's a great question. We did.
We watch the media all the time.
Okay, so we're going to go up here. You had to pick right at the top, right?
Just wanted to say thank you. I'm Mark Maloney. I sit on the 52 Division Police Committee. I just had two questions. The first, and I do want to say thank you to all these folks for doing these meetings because I think it's very meaningful. Is there somebody from the task force dedicated to kind of scouring all the best practices throughout North America in terms of, hiring, in terms of diversity, in terms of equipment, the use of force? I mean, even these ideas like that police shield that I heard for the first time, and I thought, wow, that's something. So is there somebody dedicated to doing that, to making sure that you're getting the best of whatever there is? And the second question, I recall that if you're trying to reduce costs, there's a clause, I guess, in the Toronto Police agreement with the union that requires double staffing of police vehicles after 4 o'clock. Is that still a current thing, and can that not be revisited? Because, excuse me, somebody. Because if you're trying to redeploy people to be the most effective, get them right into the community, to have 2 people in a car after 4 o'clock, it would seem to be just a no-brainer to get them redeployed.
Thank you very much. I got to tell you, this is a great opportunity. If this was the last question, this is a great opportunity. So right now in the wings, officers come out for a bit. The ones who have actually are doing all of the work that I'm pretending to take credit for today. But all the officers, that you actually don't see them all, but we have an incredible team that has been working since the task force started in January. That team was originally, and this is something that's unique to this program, it has brought a chair of a police services board whose task is oversight and governance to work in partnership, co-chair with a chief of police who is responsible for operations. They brought 7 externals, 7 internals, and those internals, many of them here today, have not only worked on what is the Way Forward, which is the 24, but in fact, what you'll see in the final report is a much larger landscape. In that, and many sub-areas are over 78 recommendations that speak the full spectrum that you made reference to. So absolutely best practices. Looking at, we have a library that is full of all the recommendations since 1957 that have told us how to be police officers, consultant reports. On top of that, they have scoured the world to look at best practices. So I'm telling you, we believe that we have a very robust library or reservoir of information. That's absolutely not a problem. With respect to a 2-officer car, these are collective agreements. These are things that have come out of different, the Justice Ferguson report, which is spoke to in the late 70s about the 2-officer cars, and I apologize, 74 after the death of a police officer. That's collective agreement material. But the one thing that we have considered in our consultations, both external and internal, is also to look at, as we move from a primary service delivery to a priority service delivery, we are going to require that 2 officers go to priority 1, 2, and 3 calls. That's the best use of those resources, as opposed to 2 vehicles, 2 cars being dispatched from different neighborhoods or different areas. So we feel that we have addressed the 2-officer cars, and that yet will be a collective agreement discussion that's certainly beyond our tenure. It's beyond ours because it's to be between the board as well as the association. But we've identified that. We've identified and worked with Environics, our external consultation, with regards to shift schedules. So we are looking at everything. So your points, I'm glad you gave us that as a good bow for this discussion. Is the reality is everything that is being said today is important. Everything that is being said is important because it's given a voice to what's important to you. And I can tell you, thank you to the scribes. Thank you to the people who have come to the other 9 consultations. I know in this room there are representatives that are not only from the CPLCs, but there are also representatives that are internal support networks that represent many incredible thinkers within our own organization. Keep us accountable. Keep us making sure that we're going to meet your needs, whether it's at the Police Services Board monthly, whether it's at a CPLC meeting at the grassroots or at a division, or whether it's at future consultation, whether it's on social media and you tweet, whether you Facebook, whatever you do to get the message out and to continue to have a voice. We are listening. I'd like to now turn it over to Chair Pringle to give the final thoughts for the day. If you do want to talk to us afterwards, we're still around. I understand there's cookies in the wings, and we'll now turn it over to Chair Pringle.
Thank you, Frank. Let me just echo Frank's thanks to all of you. As we said at the beginning, first of all, let me say it is your police service. I took this job on. I got on the board in 2011, and I was critical of the police before I came on. But I recognize, and perhaps we don't say it enough, we have one of the best police forces in North America, but it could be better. There have been things that we haven't done as well as we should do, and it's those things we want to hear back from you, not just this time, but on an ongoing basis. And because it's our intention, and the whole role and the idea of the task force is to really deconstruct to reconstruct the police force. So we want to take it down, get rid of all the historical backgrounds, and look at what is the best police force for the City of Toronto today. And we recognize that the whole concept of policing, that we were sometimes in many ways policing all communities the same, and that's not the best practice. We need to police with the communities, and so that's why the center of what we're talking about is how we work more closely with the communities to provide the best and safest city. We want to be open to criticism. We have already implemented, and it was alluded to earlier, Pat Capone and I chair the board's mental health subcommittee, which looks at both how we deal with people in crisis, so the external aspect, but also the mental health of our own staff members, the officers and civilians in the service. So that advises the board and the service on challenges. But we've also just recently, it was 5 months ago, asked a bunch of leading people from CAMH, from other organizations, to come in and evaluate how we're doing, evaluate our training, and do that on an annual basis. So that's an external look at how we're doing. Mental health is one of the biggest challenges we face. I think 24,000 calls last year, and it's rising at a rate of about 12%. So it's a huge issue. It's one the police need to be a partner in, because it's not just us. So this is really an exercise of a beginning of self-evaluation and constant improvement of how we make the Toronto Police Force absolutely the best in the world, and how we listen to you and others as to how we're doing. I hear, and you brought up the point before about the accountability and the fact that, while we think it's addressed throughout the report and all the recommendations, nowhere does it stand out. And so that was very much, Mr. Singh, something that we took to heart, because we understand that we need to be accountable and transparent. So again, let me thank you all for being here on a Saturday afternoon. Derek, we're going to come close to 4 o'clock. I'll stay right to 4 if you have more questions. But it is your police force. We are trying to make it better, much more responsive. We want to hear from you, not just now, but on a regular basis. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your input.